Thank you all so much for your support of VINwiki in 2024. Your viewership is what makes all of this possible, and we cannot thank you enough. And so we've compiled our top 10 VINwiki car stories from 2024 to count down to midnight Eastern time and ring in 2025 together. So join us in the chat. Let us know in the comments what your favorite memories were from 2024 and what you're looking forward to most in 2025. There have been some awesome stories now, and I know there's plenty more to come. And today's video is brought to you by Auto Tempest. Autotempest.com, all the cars, one search. Auto Tempest is the most powerful way to shop for your next car because they compile all the major listings into one place from all the biggest listing sites. It makes it easier than ever to find the car that you're looking for, compare it to the market at large, and make the best buying decision. So check them out now at the link in the description below to find your next car on Auto Tempest and thank them for their ongoing support of VINwiki. So now, here are our top 10 car stories from 2024. Happy New Year.
It was December of 2012, and I knew that I was going to be quitting my desk job. I had been a very good kid. I had gone to a good school. I had gotten a good job after college. And then I went on this crazy path at age 24 where I decided to quit my job and write about cars for a living, which was insane. And it was December of 2012, and I decided that I had been buying and selling and fixing and dealing with all these crappy cars, and it was time to, like, if I was gonna do this, I needed to not be spending money in that way, and I needed to buy a rational car. I remember one night I was in bed, like, scrolling on the internet, and I discovered that CarMax sells cars with Max Care, which is this, at the time, it was a 6-year pretty much bumper to bumper warranty. There were a few more exclusions than you would find in a normal car warranty, like a new car, but not many. And I was like, And the really special thing about that was that at that time, CarMax sold some pretty crazy stuff. So I bought the Range Rover, which became famous. That was the car that I bought. I bought it in December of 2012 with this 6-year warranty. But I could have bought, they were selling Audi A8 W12. These are national, so they weren't all like, I bought the Range Rover from the store in Marietta, but they had E60 M5s. They had 1 Series M's. In fact, it was so weird. I think they must have been getting the 1 Series M's from like the BMW driving school in South Carolina. There was a time when they had 10 different white 1 Series M's all listed at once. And I don't know how they were getting them, but I always assumed it was that. And so you could have bought a 1 Series M with a 6-year bumper to bumper. They had an R8 at one point. The funny thing is they refused to sell G-Wagons. What I really wanted was a G-Wagon, but they refused to, and I think still refuse to sell G-Wagons, which is so funny because those were actually pretty reliable cars. There were BMW 760s, there were S65s. In fact, CarMax used to have, probably still does, a filter by cylinder count, and I would often just click on V12. Let's see what they got today. And there were, S65s, CL65s. It was not uncommon. They used to sell crazier stuff. And I think what happened is they kind of shrunk the craziness of their inventory to meet like the regular demand. And then they also shrunk the craziness of the warranty. To be fair, you can still get a Macan Turbo or a S-Class with this Max Care. And frankly, I think you'd probably come out ahead. But back then it was you were definitely going to come out ahead. I was planning to not have a lot of money. I had been doing okay. I had like a corporate job and I was writing on the side and not telling my corporate job. But then I was like going to get rid of the corporate job and just focus on the writing. And that was one of the reasons I wanted a car with a warranty. But it was still an opportunity to have a cool car while having kind of like having a little bit of a safety net. And that was what it was. And it worked that way. So I went to the dealership. It was December 8, 2012. And I bought a 2006 Range Rover with a CarMax bumper-to-bumper 6-year warranty. And I did not know at the time that experience would in fact change my life forever, and the life of CarMax forever. I started writing for Jalopnik, which at the time was the really big car blog. And one week I didn't have anything to write about, and I was like, why don't I write about my Range Rover? And it blew up. I mean, people just were like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe they sell these warranties. This is insane. The story went totally viral, hundreds of thousands of views. And I was like, okay, I have something here. Then I kind of started rooting for it to break. I never intentionally broke it, but I definitely started being like, okay, like when's the next one? And I mean, Range Rover has this reputation for being tremendously unreliable. Unbeknownst to me, I actually bought the most reliable age of them. The 06 to 09s were of the L322 body, which went from 03 to 12, the 06 to 09s were the ones you wanted. They had the best engine, the best transmission. The later ones, which I couldn't afford, CarMax did offer them, but I couldn't afford them. The later ones had problems with timing chains, as you're well aware. The early ones had a ton of issues. The '03 to '05s, they had a BMW engine transmission that was not good in the BMWs either. And the '06 to '09s are actually reliable ones, so I actually never had any problems with the main parts of the car. The engine and trans never gave me any issues, but there was enough ancillary crap to build up over time that the warranty story just became amazing. And part of it was that it wasn't a major issue. I posted twice a year. This broke now. This $800 part. Okay, this $600 part. And so as you went through the 6 years of warranty, it started to become a pretty good story. So then I started making YouTube videos, and I would make videos as companion pieces to my articles about that car. And it was still an absolute viral thing. Every time I would do it, people were like, Doug's CarMax Range Rover broke again. And this was like now 10 years ago. So a lot of my followers currently don't even know about this or know this story. But occasionally I will get people come up to me on the street and still say, I've been following you since the CarMax Range Rover. But this was the thing I was known for the first 2 years of my career, 2-3 years. And it's funny now that I have all these other cars, I've launched cars and bids, nobody even remembers it. But it was a huge deal at the time. It's hard to explain now for people who weren't there, but it was a massive deal. Every time I'd write a story about it on Jalopnik, it would go absolutely viral. Everybody, all car enthusiasts by the end of this knew about the MaxCare warranty. And some of them didn't even know I was the impetus. They heard about it third hand from a guy who read one of the articles or something, but it became a massive, massive sensation at the time. In the end, a couple of interesting things happened. Number one, 3 years into the story, I happened to be going to Richmond, Virginia. I was buying a Nissan Skyline GTR that was there, and the CarMax is headquartered there. And so I sent an email, just a random email to their PR people. Hey, you want to get a meal? I don't even know if they know who I am. I've never spoken to them. And they're like, yeah. And then I think it was this dude named Casey. And me and him went and had dinner like late at night in downtown Richmond and like chatted about the whole thing. And we like this clandestine meeting of the two sides, right? Like me with the warranty and him with the guy that's in the company. But he told me straight up, he was like, it's obviously done more good for us than bad. Like you can't manufacture a viral story like this. Like companies would kill to have this kind of thing. But one of the other things that happened was CarMax stopped offering the warranty. So it wasn't just me. A lot of people like to blame me for this, but it wasn't just me. MaxCare was an unrealistic warranty product on a lot of the vehicles they were selling. And so not only did they stop selling some of these vehicles, they used to sell just high mileage whatever. As long as it was in nice shape, they would sell it. They stopped selling older Range Rovers, older luxury cars in general. Like they just gave all that up. When I bought my Range Rover, it was 6 years old. I don't even know if they sell 6-year-old Range Rovers anymore. And if they do, it's tight. I was looking at Cayennes the other day. They have one Cayenne Turbo. They stick to kind of the bell curve type of cars. And they shortened the warranty period. So it used to be 6 years. Now it's 5. I think it doesn't cover as many things. And on some cars, the mileage limit is much lower. So when I bought it, it was either 100,000 or 125,000 miles max. You could choose up to the mileage on the car. Not 125,000 more miles, but... And when I bought the car, it had 60,000 miles. So I was getting a 6-year, 60,000 mile bumper-to-bumper warranty on a 6-year-old Range Rover. They put a stop to that. I think on a Range Rover now, they would probably only sell you up to 75,000 miles or something. And it's only 5 years. And so the coverage has all changed. The last warranty service on a Range Rover, like everybody with a warranty, we took it in 3 months before the warranty expired. And we're like, okay, dealership, tell us everything it needs. We're going to fix it all. And it was a huge bill. It was like $8,000 and like another $800 out of pocket that the warranty didn't cover. And that was it. So I paid for the warranty. The warranty was not cheap. Even then they knew they had to charge more. And even then it was graduated. Like a Camry warranty would be $1,800 and a Range Rover warranty would be like $3,500. I think I paid around there. The total payout was, I don't remember the exact number now, but probably around $23,000. And there was some question whether CarMax would try to buy this car back or, if for a normal customer, maybe they would have. But I'll tell you this, I was not their highest payout. There were stories on Reddit at that time of guys getting V10s replaced in those M5s under the MaxCare warranty. And that one repair would have cost more than my total warranty payout. Although my story became famous, I promise you there were bigger warranty payouts than mine. I bought the car for $26,998 or something like that. And at the end, it was essentially worthless. I mean, I think because we had maintained it so well, I probably could have sold it for like $8,000. Interestingly, those L322 Range Rovers actually had kind of a come up on the used market, and nice ones sell for real money now, and maybe I shouldn't have given it away. It now is in a state where it's a $6,000 used car. It was clearly headed that direction too. Any car that lives its life on Nantucket, it's a salt air climate, it's a small island, is not going to have a long life. And that Range Rover, I ended up giving that Range Rover to a friend of mine who lives on Nantucket. Still see it. He's still driving it to this day. It's not in as good a shape. Now that the warranty is not there to cover all the parts, it's not being maintained to the same standard it was. But I saw it this summer. He's still driving it around. It's still doing his thing. It had a tow hitch, and he liked that because he had a flat trailer and you could move some of his own cars around. It's still running. Probably about 140, 150,000 miles at this point. The warranty ended at 125, and we got that servicing done right before that, and then that was the end of the CarMax Range Rover.
Today I'm going to reveal to you guys a very interesting fact about the Car Wizard and how before I was the Car Wizard, I just met my wife, Mrs. Wizard. I worked as a jail deputy for 3 or 4 years in a county jail. And I have some very interesting stories to tell you guys. Some things that I've seen. These are things that in the background as you drive by a jail or you hear about a jail, no one really knows what happens inside the jail. I'm going to give you guys kind of a insider's view on what really goes on in there. As you can imagine, it is a dangerous job. You're dealing with murderers, violent criminals, all kinds of people that resort to those types of things to solve the problems. There's another dangerous aspect to it that actually has nothing to do with violence. It's actually viruses, diseases that transmit within the jail. People come off the street. Some of them are homeless. They've been who knows where. They've been involved with who knows what. And now you're touching a lot of handles and things that they're touching. And you can inadvertently bring that home to your family. So there's lots of hand washing and things going on in there. But all that is inside the jail because it came off the street. It didn't just magically go away. It's also dangerous, not physically or with viral or bacterial. There's another danger aspect, and it is to your mental well-being. When you're around that type of negativity all the time, the lowest points of some people's lives, and experiencing families destroyed, experiencing all kinds of really bad things happening. Also, these people are trying to attack you. You frequently got to have eyes in the back of your head. After 6 months or a year, it really starts to negatively affect your mental outlook on life. When I was working at the jail, about the first or second year is when they first introduced the taser. That is when it started being used here and there on the streets, but they started thinking about using it within the jail because you get someone who's violent or has maybe a metal object they're trying to stab with. You don't want to try to box with that person or fight with that person. You just want to eliminate the violence without hurting them permanently. Get it done as fast as possible, and the taser really did do that. But up until that point, no one had ever really seen what they do or how they operate. A story that I have is kind of funny, but it's not funny because the person went through a lot of pain. But this person, who was an inmate in the facility, had gotten completely naked. They were attacking other inmates, so we got them up to a holding cell, which is just by themselves. There's no one else in there. They're pounding on the windows so hard that they're actually risking to hurt themselves, and that's an issue because you don't want inmates breaking their own arms or fingers. Then the person starts defecating and throwing it everywhere, and it's all over the windows. And finally, the actual sheriff came in and was like, we have to stop this. We have to get this guy under control. He's not going to do it by physically fighting or reasoning or talking. It's not going to work. We have to get this under control. Let's use this new invention, the taser. So we opened the door, and my friend, I won't mention any names, but he had a taser. He was ready. He shined the laser at the chest of this person, the inmate, and he looked like he was about to start running towards us, and he fired the taser. And as you can imagine, he's sitting there convulsing when these darts go into him. He's shaking. And while he's shaking, his male appendage is doing the helicopter. And at the time, it was like, it's kind of funny, but at the same time, it's not. And then the guy just kind of falls over like a stiff board. And he's laying on the ground. After it's all said and done, it was just silence. Because we were like, what did we just witness here? No one had ever, we received training, we seen how it works, we got to feel how it feels, but to actually use it and see it work. We're like, okay, so we took care of it, did all the procedures, got everything wrapped up. This inmate said, "I don't know what that is. I don't know what you just did to me. I'm done. I'm not going to be acting out anymore. Please do not use that on me again." He says, "I'm a changed man. I'm done." So we learned that day that it's kind of wild to use one of those, but it's also extremely effective. So as you can imagine, working in the jail, I've seen it all. I've seen fights. I've seen violence. I've seen drugs snuck into the jail through orifices in the human body. I've seen a lot of crazy things, but there was one inmate. I'll just say his name was AJ. I won't mention anything else other than that, but he was an African American male who was a drug enforcer on the streets of LA. I think it was LA. He was massive, very strong. I don't think I would know of anyone that could one-on-one take this guy down. He'll just break you in half. He actually had a dent in his skull right here. And it wasn't until I actually got to know him a little bit, that's actually how I earned this guy's respect, I guess. Everyone was so afraid of him. Even the jailers, the people working there, they were afraid to even handle him or do anything with him. But some days I just got this, it's boring up in housing control where you're doing all the buttons and letting inmates through the doors and doing all the gates and everything. And you can key into each cell and talk to the inmates if you say, hey, you got an appointment or whatever. But sometimes I'd key in and say, what's up, AJ? I got dialogue going on with him. I'd talk with him. And one day he was having a fit. It about broke the doors off the hinges. I just had this feeling come over me. It said, have him open the door and just walk in. And at the time, the jail captain said, no, I can't do that. He's going to attack you. I said, no, I have a feeling that won't go that way. They opened the door. I walked in, and he just stood there and looked at me. And he goes, I need to get some more toilet paper. He was out of toilet paper. He was going crazy because of that. I was like, that's it? You're throwing a big fit because of that? Why didn't you just ask for some? We could key it up and talk to the guy up there. And he's like, I'm just having a bad day. This is the way I want to respond. And I talked to him a little bit, and I said, well, we'll get you some more toilet paper. Totally calmed it down. I walked out, and the other jailers were like, how did you do that? Right. Sometimes you don't meet violence with violence. You just say, what's wrong here? What's going on? What do you need, Maybe that was kind of risky at the time. I thought, now that I look back on it, maybe he could have attacked me, but I felt that I had a dialogue with him, and it actually proved to be true. It actually worked out. And the thing I want to bring up about that particular story is what brought our kinship even between a jail deputy and a violent drug enforcer was cars. We talked about cars back and forth here or there. He used to be a mechanic many, many years ago and kind of developed a friendship out of it. And to finish out that story, why was there a dent in his head? He told me he went on a job to enforce to get money or whatever for a client that wasn't paying, and this client put an axe in his head. It went pretty deep. It broke the skull, and I was like, did you go to the hospital? He goes, no, I can't go to the hospital. For the line of work I do? No. He said, I went and pulled it out and put ice on my head, sewed it back up, and put ice on it and just lay there for a couple of days, sipping on food, drinking food and whatnot. Let it somewhat heal up. He had connections. He could get antibiotics and things. And he was like, it healed up that way. There's the dent. He said that when you do this line of work, you can't go to the hospital. Whatever happens to you, you have to deal with it. Possibly die. Just the way it is. So at that time in my life, I had actually anticipated or thinking about going on what's called going on the road, being a road patrol deputy, not just working in the jail. Actually getting my own vehicle and being a deputy out in the real world. After seeing all kinds of crazy stories like that and seeing some of the things that I've seen, there was one incident that happened. It's actually sad. It's not a good story to tell, but I'll tell it to you guys because it changed my mind on things. Actually had a city officer bring in a gentleman who was an African American, and he had a giant goose egg on his head. He was bleeding, and he actually had some teeth missing. Before we can book them into jail, we can't just book them in and they're injured. We need to know what happened. Do we need to provide assistance or any kind of medical attention? I asked the officer, what happened here? What's with the bleeding concussion and the teeth missing? And I was thinking maybe this guy got violent or something, and this officer said he wouldn't shut his effing mouth. And he used the N word. I was like, okay. And I looked back in the thing behind me is the office, and the captain was in there, and he was like, this can't fly. And this is the really crazy part of the story. They had found out that this officer had wrongfully assaulted this arrestee. The state troopers were called, and they came and arrested the officer in front of God and everybody right there and placed this officer under arrest. And after that was all said and done, that officer no longer had a job, which is, I'm glad. He doesn't need to be on the force being that way. But after that guy left, all the story's gone, everything's done, I started really reevaluating. This is a really strange world, a very negative world, and I don't think I want to bring that into my home or into my family, and I decided to pursue other ventures. So, one thing that's really funny is Mrs. Wizard would tell our children, when you go to school in the morning and someone asks, what does your dad do? Make sure you tell them he works at the jail, not that he is in the jail. Because they would go and the teacher would say, what does your dad do for a living? Oh, he's at the jail. They were like, oh, okay, what did he do? Nothing, he works there. Oh, okay, now we've clarified that. Okay, so there definitely was something funny that Mrs. Wizard worked with our kids. Your dad works at the jail. He's not in jail. Okay, and that was kind of funny. But anyways, to finalize the whole jail experience, through all the negatives and things that I saw there, I actually gained a lot of positives. From running my business now at Omega Auto Clinic as the car wizard, when a customer comes into the shop, it's almost like mind reading, but not mind reading. I can look at someone and say, this is not going to go well. I can just tell. I've been through altercations, fights, and all the different things you could think of in a jail. And I can even use this out in the public. Go to Walmart. I actually was with Mrs. Wizard one time and said, that person's about to steal something. She's like, don't say that. How do you know? Sure enough, they did. Saw them put stuff down in their pants and left. It has helped me in a lot of ways to get a feel for people with customers. I've had the office guy have customers come in that get unruly, get mad. I actually had one time that was just shouting and so angry, and it looked like he was about to hit someone. It was over something stupid, the pricing on the ticket. I went in and said, what's going on? My office guy said, this guy almost threw a chair at me. This guy is going ballistic. I don't know what his problem is. I've dealt with bigger problems than this working in the jail. The first thing I did is walk into the office, and I got right in this guy's face, eye to eye. I said, what the hell do you want? What are you doing in my office? This is my shop. You don't come in here and talk this way. I own this place. I said, if you're going to do something, do it. I said, and let's see how it ends. I said, I've dealt with bigger and badder people than you, and we can keep going doing this all day, or you can let me know what is going on here. Finally, he got his ticket out and showed me there were some discrepancies, or what he felt were discrepancies, and felt like that his wife had been taken advantage of. And after I showed him and went through it, he was like, oh, I didn't read that last line. And then he was very apologetic. And then he said, I was worried you were going to rip my head off. I said, no, I'm not actually. I was just going to stand my ground. I don't allow people to come in here and talk to my office guy that way, especially look like you're going to throw a chair at them. It actually ended okay. Actually, that person's a good customer today. But an attribute, I guess, or not really a gift or something, but something I gained from working in a jail is to be able to ascertain a situation and make an action, make a decision quickly.
What have you boys gotten me into?
How you doing?
Good. How you
We're
doing?
going to tug a moldy, sitting for 15 years, Ford GT up that hill. One small step for man, one giant leap for
Ed Bullion.
Ed Bullion. What's up?
Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you
How
too.
you doing? Oh, this is a welcome wagon.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome to Atlanta and our fine traffic. Best explored in a cultivated spec Lamborghini Diablo. Woo, all right, landscaping truck. And there is a flatbed, not the one that is headed to our destination, but we do have one on the way. You are here for not your normal breed of automobile, but for a very Ed Bolian spec Ford GT.
That is correct.
Yes.
And yeah, you know, look, I consider myself really privileged to be able to buy, sell, and locate the best cars on earth, and I'm always pursuing all sorts of different things, and I'm always looking for interesting things. And you know, to me, interesting can be many different things.
That's right.
You know, this is interesting. I mean, a Ninja Diablo. I mean, come on, it's cool, it's interesting, it's storytelling. This Ford GT is interesting and cool in that, and I mean, you saw the photos, man.
Exactly. I got two photos of this car. One to demonstrate the hoarder house we are headed to. The other to demonstrate the reason we have to stop at Home Depot first to buy some hazmat suits.
Yeah, exactly. Today, for once, I am not living by the safety third principle.
That's right. We're going to keep the mesothelioma away. We are going to protect ourselves. And we are going to excavate. Today we are the excavated collector.
Exactly.
One size fits all. One pair. Two pair. I do. We'll take it both. You got the keys?
Oh, for the car. Yes. I mean, it just presents itself, really, the scenario that we are engaging in, that we're walking into.
Yeah, quite the accoutrement.
Yeah.
Oh, hey, there is that is a dead rat. No, I think that's a squirrel.
Oh,
I think that is a dead squirrel. These were a good idea. So
the taxonomy here.
What are the instructions
I respect that.
for entry?
Okay, so, you know, I dragged you out here to this here barn find. I don't want to expose you. I don't know if we have a whole mess of these jumping out behind us.
Okay.
Let me dive in there and see what
I'll let you be the first
let's
victim.
see what we're in for, man. So, all right, hopefully I don't get anything here.
Oh boy. Is it there?
Okay, we have a car. We have a
car. All right, I'm gonna get the full experience.
All right.
With you
okay.
guys.
All right.
right,
And you, my friend, are going to appreciate this one.
Okay.
All right. Here we go.
Oh! I love it.
Ta-da.
Look at this.
Look at this thing, man.
Oh my goodness gracious. Wow.
Yeah.
All the spare fluids you could dream about. Let's stay up. No?
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll find a solution.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness, look how lovely and filthy. Holy cow, the mold. You are not lying.
No,
the picture was an accurate depiction of the mold.
There is a petri dish inside of the car, my friend.
Well, I think it is time to sweep away the debris, don the hazmat suits, and I don't know if you're pushing or steering, but I think in both cases, we need to be well protected.
Absolutely.
So our plan is to take it out of here, thanks to KO Towing here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we're going to take it up to Cameron Davis's shop at DC Motor Works, where he is going to start the process of waking this car up. So it's been sitting for at least 10, probably 15 years, and after we get it running, it'll be time for the cleanup. And we're going to do that partnered with Glossit. They've cleaned a lot of my cars, but I've never given Rich and his team something quite this disgusting. And I think it is going to be quite a sight to behold when he finally sees the car when he comes in a couple of weeks. And so that will be kind of the next path of this car's adventure. And I will continue to try to talk you into selling it to me. But I know there is somebody eagerly awaiting their rebuilt, cleaned up Ford GT. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
You're going for the headstock first, huh? Let's see what their definition of XL is.
That's right.
See if it's my definition of XL or not.
Oh goodness. Yeah, a little snug in the torso.
False advertising.
These are the full-on OJ spec. There we go inside here.
Oh, look at you.
Look at me.
You look fantastic,
protected
my friend.
and professional.
I gotta get on your level.
All right, so we can't get the doors open with the battery off. So do we jump it?
So we open the we'll open the hood here.
Okay.
Get the battery going, and that should give us access to what we need. So
That is an exotic fungus. It has a smiley face on it.
Yeah.
All right, how do we unlatch this thing?
So we need the key, which left right out here.
You know, Matt Farah's dream is a silver Ford GT.
Oh, really?
And Hoovy loves them. DeMuro's got his. Oh, we have to undo it like that?
Yep.
Do I have to undo the other side?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, just this side. So.
Ah, yes. Okay, look. There is nothing dead in there.
Yeah.
Does that support itself?
It does.
Look at these.
The hood struts.
If this was an Italian car,
Wow.
none of that would be true. Oh, little buckety buck. All right, I'm going around.
Yeah, let's get this. Let's extricate this.
There's those fluids you ordered.
Didn't realize I ordered so many ghastly old fluids. All right.
Battery.
Battery's right there. Let's
Oh, it's just all
get in there and hook on up the positive.
Whew. Okay.
Did you want to attempt a vehicle start for dramatic effect?
Will it make us look like idiots for trying? Dumbest door design in the history of everything.
It works great if you have no other cars around you.
And no head. All right, they've put some essential oils in the passenger footwell.
These are essentials when entering a moldy plant.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Essential oils are.
Oh, we ran out of it, and then the bugs had it.
What's that?
And this is for the odor, I think. It's deodorizing.
Ah. Has it deodorized? Okay, I'm preparing myself for entry. All right.
I hate roosters.
Do you?
From the singing judge. Rebel pride, sitting in the park in the dark. I hate roosters.
Oh my God,
I ought to win an Oscar. You can't get enough of the fair. You can't do it. Don't even try to get enough of the fair. It cannot be done.
All right.
This is fuzzy.
I'm preparing to enter.
Oh,
All right.
it's like hey, I'm glad I wore no socks today. We got
a choice.
We got 3 floor mats.
Yeah, I threw.
Well, oh, it's got Macintosh. Is this a 4-option car?
This is a 2-option car.
No, it's got stripes. It's got the Macintosh. It's got the wheels.
No wheels.
No wheels? And the
No
calipers
wheels.
aren't painted?
No.
Oh.
I don't think they are.
There's only 4 options on a Ford GT.
Yes. Oh, listen to that.
Oh! Is it going to start? That doesn't feel good.
All right, we ready?
Here goes nothing.
I would agree with that assessment, but
Does it move?
today, I don't know. gotta tempt it.
We got to move all the
You have to
junk.
move the junk, but it probably moves. I mean, listen here. Listen, Ed, hear the
Clutch is clutching.
clutch is clutching. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, let's clear the junk.
I'm trying not to break my neck on this mud that does not drain here. Toothbrush right here. All right. This man definitely prized cleanliness. Ed, isn't this where you store all your saws underneath your exotic supercar? Yeah. Are we good?
I think we're kind of good.
Should we attempt to move this car?
Let's get it.
All right. Let's see if we can drive this thing out
I
of
think
here.
this is a driving automobile.
I actually think it may.
Built Ford mediocre.
Safety. We are fully back into the safety third realm, my friend.
Decapitated.
Okay. It actually holds an idle by itself.
Oh, it's,
Look, my
it's
foot's
ready
up.
to go. Just throw it on the lot.
All right, yeah.
Retail ready.
All right.
I mean, it's not even like close, if I'm honest. Like I can't even mercy slouch. All right.
By the way, let's just take a moment here and appreciate the fact that there's not a check
No
engine
check
light.
engine light on.
No check
Wow.
engine light, no airbag light.
Door's ajar.
Yeah, well, probably because my door's ajar.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Floor it. Woo!
I don't think it has enough. I don't think there's enough juice right now.
These Fords, they're not very fast.
Yeah, this is not a fast forward
No,
at the
man.
moment. We'll make it a
Alright.
fast forward though.
Ferrari be faster.
It's
Wow.
holding an idle though.
There's a lot of perspiration coming out of my glove. I'm gonna be honest with you.
God, if this plate,
It's an awkward amount.
if this were not already a biohazard situation,
Yeah,
man.
we have really soiled it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we got it out of the garage.
Yeah, let's just appreciate the fact that we're actually sitting here with a car that is idling under its own power.
Yeah, let's get out of it.
Yeah. Wait, should we see if the e-brake works? E-brake works! And we can open the doors wide now. Which I will say. It actually sounds like it's kind of coming back.
It might be firing a little more. Golly, the sweat. The sweat is real.
I don't think we have enough juice to get it up the hill, but
You want to back it down?
Yeah, I'm trying to get this little bit of angle right here.
Somewhat. Make sure you document all the imperfections.
exactly, yeah, we got to make sure that checkout sheet is done right.
It smells, and it lingers. It lingers in your lungs.
It almost stings the nostrils a little bit, shall we?
COVID's got nothing on that.
That's right. So we've brought the Barn Find 4 GT up to Alpharetta to DC Motorworks, Cameron Davis's shop here, and he is going to wake this car up. We got it to start, but it only runs on half its motor. There's a lot of likely fuel pump issues and the fuel pump controllers and the kind of common things that people see on 4 GTs. And for one that's been sitting for maybe 15 years, these are to be expected. But this is the man to bring it back.
Yeah, well, we got my team here. I didn't tell them exactly what was coming because we wanted to surprise them, and
They're surprised, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm a little surprised more so on this one. Because, like I said, it kind of lingers a little bit, but like I said, nothing we're not used to here at DC Motorworks. We get a lot of fun and exciting things. A lot of them from Ed himself. But,
That's right. And I didn't want to clean it up before you got to see it.
No,
and
it's,
so we've got the team from Glossett. They're going to be by soon. That they're going to help us totally clean it up. That's the biggest job, I think. I think actually making an old American car run is a lot easier than the remediation of the mold. That's a decade and a half of mold right there.
You want to do the honors?
Careful, don't die.
We open the back and check oily things.
Well, look, the struts work. Let's just start with that. We have working struts.
Oh, it's clean too. Yeah, how about that? That very well could be.
So our adventure with the Barn Find 4 GT is just starting. Cameron and his team are going to get the thing running after it's lied dormant for over a decade here in Atlanta. I still got to try to talk Matt into letting me buy it. He says one of his friends has to have this thing, but I'm not a huge 4 GT guy, but how could you not love a story like this? Pulling it out of a barn, moving all the dead rodents, it just doesn't get any better. Now, I don't know how hard it's going to be to clean, but I do know that we have the perfect team for the job. The guys from Glossett are coming back. They did the Paris Hilton SLR, they cleaned up the Spiker, they transformed the Diablo, and their project for this year will be the hardest one yet. Trying to get that thing clean is going to be an insane project. I don't even know how you do it, but they will know exactly how to do it, and I can't wait to bring you along for the journey and watch how they make it happen.
In '98, July 7th, I open up my business outside of a Coe auto auction. And within 6 months, I grow into a 40,000 square foot fenced in piece of property, 10,000 square foot building, 20 employees. We got Scott Ailes, Uli and Blackburn. Anybody was a somebody in the exotic car wholesale world, running cars at a Coe, we got their business. Scotty came into my place one day and said, the reason I picked you of all the detailers and recon businesses that want us is because your shop looked like a dentist office. I mean, we took pride in it. Mom, dad, sisters, brothers, in-laws all worked for me. I'm the youngest of four. My whole dream to leave Philadelphia was to do that. So we put a lot of passion in setting cars up and getting acclimated in the exotic car world. My thing was, as a kid, I wanted to buy and sell Lamborghinis, Countaches. Saw Cannonball Run at 6 years old. Went nuts in the middle of my mom and dad at the drive-in. My dad threw me out of the Cadillac, and I watched the opening scene from outside the car because I was like a BB in a boxcar, just all over the place. From that point in my life, I knew I wanted to buy and sell Lamborghinis. I didn't know it was a business. I thought you had to be like Prestige or a big dealership. I'm like, wow, it's going to be a lot of work to get there. Then I see the Tom Cruise opening scene in Rain Man, where he's on the phone hustling cars. My dad said, no, that's a business. It's a wholesale business. You can buy these cars pre-owned. So that was 8th grade. 10 years later, I moved to Florida, build a recon business, get all the Lamborghinis in. The goal to have a recon business wasn't because I was passionate about cleaning cars. I don't come from this line of business. My dad sold Chevrolets. And he taught me sales because me and my dad I was the apple of his eye growing up. You know, I listened, I asked questions. In 2006, 8 years in business, I got a couple $1 million put away. Worked 20-hour days, Christmas, Easter. You know, being the youngest of four was the black sheep. But successful. My family's making a paycheck. You know, I felt like I accomplished something. I buy a Ferrari Testarossa for when they were nothing. I buy it at a COE auction. Everyone's telling me, oh, nobody wants those cars. Nobody at all wants those cars. What are you doing? I buy the car. I take it to the Celebration Car Show where Jeff has the owner of the Cannonball Run car. Bring it out there. I'm wiping the car down. I look like the detailer. This dentist comes up to me. He's like 50, 60. He's got a girlfriend. She's like 20. And he says to me, call the owner up. Tell him I want to buy the car because the car looks great. I said, it's not for sale. I said, call the owner up. I said, okay. I'll call the owner up. The next morning I see him. I said, the owner said and I give him the number. It's like $74,000. Well, I said, oh, so you don't have the money. I kind of insult him, you know, and the girl kind of smiles at me, you know, his little girlfriend. I said, so you don't have the money? He says, no, I got the money. He buys the car. I make 3 months check. By this time, I got an 80,000 square foot piece of property and 51 employees. So that's my first Testarossa. I sell the car fast, make myself a bunch of money. I'm like, holy cow. It takes 2 years to shut my business down. I do not want to run 50 employees no more. Now I'm like, okay, this was the goal. Do the recon, get to the buying and selling cars. Shut the business down finally, the shop side of it. I still kept the on-site auction cleanup, which was a fortune. We made a fortune doing that. Shop cost me money when you looked at it. So I buy the Testarossa, get that done. I start buying. I said, this is what I want to do. I buy 10 348s for about 25 to 30 grand. Nice cars. At least 15 308s under $25,000 with no miles. Red tan, red cream, Boxster trim. 10 Testarossas for around 33 grand each, you know, roughly I'm paying. Panteras I was buying for 25,000. Cannot find a Countach anywhere at all. So from 06 to 2011, October, never find a Countach online that made sense. I don't even think I saw one online. My house has black mold, I get sick. I can't figure out what's wrong with me. I'm having respiratory problems, I'm sick all the time, I don't go out. I always say God knows what he's doing because if I didn't get sick, I wouldn't have found any of the cars. I'm in my office 20 hours a day. So I go to Auto Tempest. Somehow I end up on Craigslist and I start in alphabetical order, Bakersfield, California. What's the chances I find a Countach? 4 bad photos. Call the guy up. He says he's 80 years old, bought it new, and he can't get in and out of the car. So he decided to sell it. How much do you want? $75,000. I never even want to say yes because then they think they'll have money on the table. So I said, can you throw in the shipping? No problem. Wire him to 75 grand. This car shows up, looks like we painted it with a brush. I'm like, okay, I could dial this car in. But I'm a little nervous starting it. Like my legs are shaking. I remember that day. Put the car away. Find another one like 3 weeks later. Find another one. I'm buying these cars at $75,000 now. Peter Kumar has an 83 5000S carbureted car, mint condition. How much? 75 grand. You throw in the freight, same thing. Buy the third car. I end up with 14 of them. I probably would have never sold those cars because I made enough money selling the other stuff. My dad says to me, he sits in the Countach. He's got a steak shop belly because he owned a steak shop at one time. And he can't get out of the car. And he goes, what did you pay for this car? I said, 75 grand. He goes, you're an idiot. He can't. I said, Dad, I can get out of the car. You can't. Why am I the idiot? As my marriage is going to crap after 24 years together, I decide to put the car on the market. My dad says to me, Anthony, what makes you think these cars are 200-300 grand? I said, because there's no way I can afford 14 of my dream cars. Our generation, the guys I'm buying them from are all 70 years old, 80 years old. They said they bought them new. Those guys don't know how to use the internet like we do. So there wasn't, Haggerty said the cars were 50 grand. That's all they said they were. At this point, when I put the car on the market, I put it up there. I can't remember. It was like 200,000. I sell the car. But all the forum guys came at me. Who's this Monday morning quarterback, Johnny complaint? I'm like, why are all these people so negative? I couldn't believe how that world is. When they don't know you and you're coming out and you're, oh, you bought the car for 75. Who do you think you are? I'm like, well, that's what the car's worth. I mean, I know what their cars are worth. Generations moved the needle. Remember when Copo Camaros were $1 million? When our fathers passed and left us the cars, we didn't want that car. We're not going to pay $1 million for that car. The price comes back down. Well, our generation, the X generation guys, postered on the wall, we got money now. So we're going to fight for these cars. So timing the market was easy when you looked at it that way. When you saw these Testarossas selling so cheap, like, oh, it's only a matter of time. Because I got all my money around 38 years old, 39. That's where I started making some serious money. So acquiring these cars all at that time, it kind of makes sense. When that first one hit the market and there was nothing before that, and then the second one, the third one, you were hearing the same story. I'm older now, I can't get out of the car. So that's how I ended up with all those cars. So the first Countach that went up for sale was the 83 5000S. I bought off of Gullwing Motors for $75,000, mint condition. I couldn't believe when the car showed up how nice it was, because the one I bought out of Bakersfield was rough for the same price. Car goes on the market for a premium. Phone rings, it's my birthday. I'm up at 5:30 every morning, not my birthday. I slept in late. I think I had some tequila the night before. So it's like 10, 11 o'clock, phone rings. Thought it was a joke. I'm interested in buying the car. I said, somebody's pulling a prank on me. I remember the TV on in the living room, vacuum running. So I go in my closet and I'm trying to negotiate the deal, holding the phone quietly, holding my ear. And for 10, 15 minutes, he's trying to knock like 50 grand off the car, then 15 grand off the car. And I will not negotiate. I said, this is the price. It's like bread when you go to 7-Eleven. Whatever's on the bread, you pay when you get to the counter. He says, I'll take the car. Get a phone call. Hi, Tony, this is the money exchange guy for the purchase of the Countach. And he says, do you know who you sold the car to? I said, no, some guy, I don't know. He was overseas. He said it was the ruler of Qatar. That guy negotiates everything. And he said, you were the toughest negotiator you ever dealt with. You didn't take a penny off the car, and he knew what you paid for it, you know? The crazy part about it was, how do you sell the Countach on your birthday? Your dream car. You sell for a record high to the ruler of a country on your birthday. So for me, it's so easy to say this had nothing to do with me. Look, when it comes to blessings like that, there's no way. I'm not that smart. I just figured, as a kid, I remember laying in bed dreaming of the lines of that car. I didn't have a magazine. I couldn't afford a DuPont registry in Philadelphia when I was a kid. Based on a Cannonball Run and a Matchbox car, I would lay down at night and think about the lines of the car and talk to God about this stuff. So the fact that I was able to be part of these cars in the marketplace, have so many of them, to sell one on my birthday to a ruler of a country, just goes to show you that it's a blessing from above. I remember calling a big dealer, a Lamborghini dealer, and saying, hey, why don't you put the car on consignment at your place? $150 I'll take, and you should ask $200. And the dealer says to me, you can't sell that car for $100 grand if you put 50 grand in the trunk in cash. And I was like, no, you're wrong. And I saved all these emails because I knew I love being historically correct. I could be a little bit, when you're negative to me, I'm like, okay, I want to prove you wrong. The last two I bought was the downdraft from Bob Liff and the Series 2 low body from Roy Katz for $155. That was a great story. Guys were calling me up saying, I'll give you 80 grand for the car. I'm like, 80 grand when I was buying the 75K cars. I'm like, where are you coming up with 80 grand? I'm asking 200. Well, I'm not going to let you make that kind of money off of me. Oh, really? Is that how this works? Well, I'll let you make 5 grand. Okay, what if my dad gave me the car? That shuts them right up because they're like, oh, what are you going to give me 5 grand for the car at this point? So I think by the time I started putting the first 12 on the market, that's when the last two were bumped from 155 to 160. I don't even think the downdraft at that time was worth that. But when the dealer saw what I was asking, they're like, let's just put it up there. And I ended up buying Roy Katz car and the Gary Bobliff car, which I would have kept those two cars if it wasn't for the divorce. Yeah, time in the market for me was about watching the generations come into money. It was roughly $1 million tied up in all the cars. And then when everything was said and done, we turned it into $3 million. So it was a 200% return. From 2012, when the separation started, until the last one I sold in 2000, I sold them all in 2012. I think all the cars were sold, I believe, in 1 year, because I bought my first one October 2011, and I had all 14 by 2012, and then started selling them in 2012 and had them all sold before I moved to Palm Beach in 2013. I had 2 left. I had the low body car and a side draft car, which I was keeping. But then the way things got, I said, I can't, I didn't want this to get ugly. I get a call from the guy that buys, I don't want to say who it is, but he has 25 of them. He has one of every year. And he says, son of a bitch, you were right. I'm walking out. In fact, I get in a fight with a car dealer who was disrespectful over my divorce. He went and said something. My wife was at the auction. He said, Tony's got a new girlfriend or something, and ruffling feathers. So I went in his office and I said, why would you do that? And we kind of got into it. And he owed me money. I said, why don't you pay me the $1,000 you owe me? So he pays me the money, and then I'm a God person. I put everything in the Lord's hands. He said something to me like, I'm going to ruin your name in this business. I'm like, why would you say something like that? Like, what did I ever do to you? Sure enough, I end up on the front page of Ferrari Market Letter because I had a police car out of a 348. So I'm on the front page. Jim Weed writes a nice story and says, hey, Tony had all the kids climbing in the car at Celebration Car Show. Well, that detailer for that dealer calls me up and says, man, you got the owner pissed. I said, what'd I do now? He says, you're on the front page of the Ferrari Market Letter, and it's on his desk, and he's in a bad mood, and I know that's what it is. Not long after that, my phone rings. It's Sunday. I come out of church, and it's this big Lambo collector, and he says, son of a bitch, you were right. I said, what'd I do? He said, a Countach just sold at Monterey for $1 million, and it wasn't running. They pushed it across the block. Tony, how did you know this? Because when he bought the pair from me, I sold him a pair for like $360. Roy Katz car I bought for $155, I sold it for $225. And I didn't negotiate that car. And I said to him, look, if you want to buy the pair, I'll sell you the pair for $360. I'll make a few bucks on I think that was the one car I broomed. I made 20 grand maybe on it. But I said, the low body, I want the 70 grand profit on the car. If not, I'm going to wait and put it away, get 300 grand. So he buys the pair, and I spent an hour on the phone with him, and I'm telling him, these are going to be $1 million in 5 years. It wasn't but a year and a half later when he called me up and said, first off, you're on the front page of the market letter. Second off, how did you know this with these cars? The car just did $1 million, and that's how he called me the Countach King. So when hashtag Countach King was floating around, I would get, who do you think you are calling yourself that? I said, I didn't call myself that. The guy that listened to me and purchased a car, he named me that. But it comes down to this. I'm all about the Lord. I'm no saint, but everything that's happened is God blessing me. As a kid, I loved that car like we all did. And the fact that I was a part of something like the price spike and timing the market just means that That's why I said I had to go through hell to get to heaven. At the best part of my life, I went through the worst part of my life, and it ended like a dream.
He pulls me over, gets out of his car, but stands next to it and starts waving at me to come over to him. So cannonball has always been a passion of mine ever since I started watching the VINwiki videos about them. And I wanted to hit some sort of record, whether it be a solo record, a diesel record, any of the records that were post-COVID, because those environments don't exist anymore. My goal I set for myself was going to be 27 hours, just barely fast enough for the fastest guy. So of the solo record of 25:55, I learned that it was not real, or it was very much fabricated. I figured that was somewhat achievable, especially in my car. So my car is a 2015 BMW 535 diesel. I wanted it to be a diesel because they usually typically get better gas mileage, and with the cannonballs, stops are important, right? The first thing I did pretty much within the first year of owning it was tuning it so I can be faster. Then the second thing I did was get the radar detector. My whole aspect with this car is to do the cannonball and then be able to drive it to 250,000 miles. So it's all hidden in a little compartment. And then the third thing, of course, was the gas tank. Having that set up, buying the gas tank, and then getting it, installed was a little bit of a challenge, but all in all, I had about 40 gallons, and it gave me a range of going at high speeds of about 900 miles before having to stop, which was, a very good thing. The radar detection is the Insta360 that has the laser jammer on the front and back. It's very low detection. You can't even see it. And it does all the different K bands and X bands and everything like that, all wrapped into one. As a solo driver, you want to be mindful as not having too much information come at you all at once. So I wanted to keep it as kind of as minimalistic as possible. And it did do its job, right? I got 0 speeding tickets. I pretty much knew where the cops were based on Google Maps or that thing. And it worked well. There was even one instance where I saw the cop on Google Maps, was driving normally, didn't hear any radars, and then he lasered me right on the back end. It's like, oh, he looks like he's going fast. I've done multiple cross-country trips, not just because of Cannonball. I was able to do the coast to coast, which was from San Diego to Jacksonville. That was kind of my prep run. I did that last year. I was like, I want to try and do it under 24 hours, see how well the car can do. Because, you know, when you start out, you have to go very high speeds, as fast as the car can, as fast as possible, as much as possible. Getting to 100 is one thing, 120 is another thing. And then when you get up into the high speeds, it's a whole nother level of things coming at you really, really fast. So you got to have some practice along with it. You can't just go and do the cannonball and expect to have success, right? So I did a couple practice runs, Las Vegas to like LA, Las Vegas down to Phoenix, just to see how the car can do. And I was able to cut down a 4 or 5 hour drive down to, 3 hours or less, mostly because of traffic, right? And it all comes down to traffic. My car originally had stagger tires, and on the coast to coast run, I was always worried about a spare tire. After the coast to coast, I did a cannonball attempt, but got a flat tire right in the middle of it, and I was stuck dead in the water because I didn't bring a spare tire, because I would have needed to bring 2, right? So I swapped out my tires to make them the same on all sides, got a spare tire and put it in the back just in case. Then I got also flat tire repair kit because, I didn't want to be stuck dead in the water. So I tried to just plan it out where my start time, mostly, because that's where I have control. I wanted to do as in the middle of the night as possible. I did it on a Monday because everybody already did their partying, they're sleeping it off and being slow to get up on Monday, right? So I left around 2 a.m. from the Red Ball garage, made it out of New York in pretty good time because there was absolutely no one in the road. on the road, like within anywhere. Early on, within the first, I would say, couple hours of me trying to floor it as fast as possible, I started getting check engine lights. One of the things I also did was to keep a monitoring of my engine. So I was running the torque app on a tablet so I can keep statistics and know everything that was going on with it. When I got those check engine lights, I immediately looked what they were. They were something related to fuel. It was very obscure what it was. So I tried to clear them, but they just kept coming back. If I kept flooring it though, it eventually went into limp mode, where if I kept the pedal on the floor, it wasn't going anywhere, right? So I had to pull over for a real quick, turn off the engine, turn it back on, clear the codes, get back on the road, only for the check engine lights to come back on. I have to make the decision, do I keep going or do I try again and try and fix the car? I decided to send it just because if I'm going to blow up the engine, I might as well just do it, or if one way or another, I'm going to make it, whether I'm limping along or not. But having the check engine lights be in Jersey, that was a long way to get there. So I decided to just keep going, but not floor it all the way, and just slowly make my way up to top speeds. I keep going at nighttime. I'm making pretty good headway. As the day progresses, there's more and more cars that get on. In the wee hours, about, I would say 4 or 5 in the morning, when you have the construction crew or the early morning risers get on, going to work, I ended up having quite a few, I call them citizens brigade type of people, where they don't like what I was doing with my driving, because I was either following too close or I was just going too fast for them, but they decided to cut me off, get in front of me and stay in front of me and block my traffic. A few of them had a few nice hand gestures along the way. During the day, I would get into the pockets of traffic, right? And it's either going to be cars passing cars, or cars passing trucks, or trucks passing trucks. And there's always that group of cars that always stay together. And then if you end up passing them, you'll have a nice couple miles of road before getting on to the next one. And that was pretty much what happened the majority of the day, right? Yeah, I did get up to 151. A lot of that was because of the downhill going down the El Cajon Pass, get up to my 120 and just like go down the giant mountain and without braking, which was a very fun experience because you don't get to do that doing in the El Cajon Pass. I pretty much had the check engine light on the entire time, and it didn't go into limp mode again after that, just the one time, and then I kept my foot off the throttle a whole lot. And then it did fine. But again, with the least amount of traffic during the nighttime, it is where I was able to achieve the highest speeds possible and maintain my high average. And then during the daytime, I had a lot of cars that I would get up to 120, and then as soon as I get as close as I can to the car or the group of cars, I would slow back down to the 80 or 65, and we go in and out of them safely. Sometimes it would pass 10 cars that on the right because they're all lined up trying to pass one truck. And then I ended up getting in front of one person because he's too afraid to actually pass the truck while the other car's in front of him or something. And then in between those chunks of cars, get up as fast as you can. It may last a minute or two and then slow back down to, 80, 70 or whatever. But then the whole achieving the speeds is all about, going as fast as you can whenever you can. So whenever I had an open road, I was going as fast as I can, regardless. My whole goal is to just make it there, right? The last attempt that I did, I got a flat tire, right? I just wanted to make it, whether it took me 35 hours or whether it took me 25 hours, right? I did get pulled over in Oklahoma. That was one of the weirdest stops I've ever experienced, and I get pulled over a lot. I was going in a construction zone, or coming up to a construction zone on the freeway in Oklahoma, and right before the construction started, there was the on-ramp that came on. There was a car that was coming up, and that would get in front of me and into the one lane, and I decided to kind of cut him off and get in front of him, but he decided he didn't like that. This was one of those citizens brigades that, really had some choice words, where he actually rolled down his window, put his head out and was yelling at me something, right? And then gave me the hand gesture. Well, 20 minutes down the road, clear ahead of him, going through a whole bunch of other traffic, I start hearing my radar detector go off, right? I'm like, okay, I'll slow down, get behind these cars, these group of cars, and just kind of go the speed limit, cruise, and let them be, right? As soon as I pass him, he starts getting back on the freeway and is kind of following me at a distance to see what I'm doing, right? I know this. I hear him with his radar detection, so I just kind of mosey along until he gets up behind me and eventually pulls me over. He pulls me over, gets out of his car, but stands next to it and starts waving at me to come over to him. Right? He's like, come get out of your car, come over here. I want to talk to you, type of thing. I'm like, no, I don't want to get out of my car. So I'm kind of doing the gestures back and forth between them until I finally decide, okay, I'll get out of the car. And I'm out in the grass area trying to talk to him while the cars are passing him. And to me, I've never had to get out of the car, so it was weird to begin with. He explains in Oklahoma how this is his standard procedure or something like that, where they have you get out of the car and sit in their car with you and write up the ticket. And he just wanted to talk to me or whatever. He also explained that some other driver had called me in, so he was waiting for me, right? And so after he said that, I'm like, okay, I'll get in the car. I'll talk to you. And he already said didn't get me on speeding, even though I was called in for speeding. And the only reason why he pulled me over because I was following too close. So I get in the car. He asked me a bunch of questions like, where are you going? Where are you coming from? I'm like, I'm going to LA. I'm coming from New York. Simple one-word answers, He's like, okay, that's fine. I'm going to write you up for a warning. As I'm sitting in the passenger seat while he's typing out this warning ticket, I'm just asking him questions because that's the only thing I can do, right? He then admits that this wasn't his cruiser, it's a loaner cruiser, and he was having trouble with his laptop and printing the ticket. And he was like, okay, you're done. Just, you can be on your way. I'm like, okay, thank you. I was in New Mexico driving along the 40, and I was getting, the sun was setting, and right around hour 22, hour 23 was when I was starting to get really, really tired. I took a 5-hour energy. It took a little bit to kick in, but right after my last stop in Kingman was when I got my second win with it and really made a strong push to the end. My time goal was to hit 27 hours or less. So I got close, didn't quite make it. The S6 was 25 hours, but that was during COVID. I figured 27 hours was somewhat respectable to get into, especially as a solo person, not knowing what to do. So I just tried to make a goal that was basically 24 hours plus 3 hours because of your time zone differences. Near the end, as I get into California, though, as I'm doing my second win and I'm making some great time, I'm going through LA really, really fast, right? And to get to Portofino, you're going from freeway to freeway to freeway, and then you eventually exit, right? Well, on one of the freeways that I get into, I'm going, 100, 110 until I pass this cop that seemed to be right on the freeway. But he wasn't running his radar, and so I didn't really see him until I passed him on the corner of my eye. So I immediately slowed down to the speed limit. He immediately gets behind me and follows me for a good 2 miles until he realizes that I'm not going to do anything wrong, and he just moves on his way. Once he moves on his way, exits, I get back up to my fast speeds until I get to the exit that you take to Portofino. I got off on Sepulveda, and as I was making my way to Portofino, it's the last stretch into Portofino, and there's several lights on that road, but it is a main road that everyone uses. 2 in the morning, no one's on the road. I didn't want to blow through red lights just to make a certain time. I wanted to be as cautious as possible, but it just so happened that every time I started slowing down to the light going, from 80 to 50, it turned green for me, and then I was able to continue on, and I actually, through that entire stretch, didn't hit a single red light, which was amazing. Well, as soon as I got to Portofino and for the security guard door, as soon as I got out, I immediately peed on the stock, and it was a great relief. My moving average was 105. My top speed was 151, and that was a hard thing to achieve. Total, it was 27 hours, 16 minutes, which was just 16 minutes over my goal. My total stop time was 32 minutes, but 12 to 15 minutes was because of the cop. If I didn't have the cop, I believe I could have made it in under the 27 hours, yes. That was another thing I wanted to make sure I did it post-COVID to see what a normal run would look like, right? You have the COVID people that did some incredible times, and then you have the normal people during normal hours or normal years, and wanted to see what I did then. I wanted to at least capture it via a couple of different GPS on a couple different devices, which I had my Drive Smart Garmin, I had my phone running Google Maps and my location timeline, and then under the Torque app, I also try to keep my location history on that, and it would save a GPX file as well as all the data logging that it did on the car as well. I figured the other things that would have been good enough would have been my geotagged and time-stamped photos of when I got there, of, back and forth. I figured that was good enough. I just learned about Glimpse after the fact from Mason. So I downloaded that, and it's like, maybe on the next one I'll use that. A lot of other people have put a lot of time and effort into this, and I was doing it in a more or less minimalistic kind of way. And so being the solo person, having the record as a solo person is amazing, and I don't think anybody is crazy enough to try it and beat that. I'm also proud that it's the diesel record, and I'm also very happy that it beat all the non-COVID records.
I was the director of sales at Lamborghini Atlanta from 2009 to 2015, and when I talk to people about that, one of the first questions is always, tell me about your worst customers. And I'm not here to air dirty laundry or use names or anything like that, but there were some very entertaining cases that you could really learn something from when you think about shopping for a car. And so I decided to think through my 10 worst experiences and compile them for a video. The first is a guy who ran a Ponzi scheme on himself. Now that sounds ridiculous and probably impossible, but it was a wildly entertaining and terrible financial outcome for him, and I'll explain what happened. He came in with a Maserati, and I always think of Maseratis as sort of like the perfect gateway drug supercars, because you can like any aspect of a Maserati and that point you to a better next supercar. So if you like the aesthetic or the sound, you might like a Ferrari. If you like the materials and the luxury, you might like a Bentley. If you like, the extreme nature of a sports car, you might move towards a Lamborghini or a McLaren, something like that. And so, it's always interesting when somebody comes in because you can just listen to their remarks about their Maserati and know what should come next. And it seemed like this guy wanted an Aston Martin, but he was most certainly not a car guy. He didn't know what year his car was through the initial trade figures. He kept telling us it was 2 years newer because he actually didn't know. He told us it was an addition to the car that never existed, that we couldn't find any evidence of. It was a really, really strange thing, but his most important issue was that he refused to lose money on the car. And of course, he'd had the car for several years and they had depreciated massively, as Maseratis do. So I was showing him example after example of cars just like his that were for sale for far less than he was demanding on trade, as though he thought we had some mystical ability to artificially improve the value of his car, which certainly we did not. But he said, look, if you can get me what I need for my trade, I'll buy whatever Aston Martin you want me to. And I'm like, man, that doesn't make any sense. Like, buy the car that you want. He's like, nope, as long as you can put this deal together, we can do business right now. Now, at the time, we had a pretty big incentive on the Aston Martin Rapide. It was probably a $20,000 or $40,000 rebate. We were able to discount them really heavily, which also means that we can pretend to give someone that much more on trade if they're willing to pay the MSRP for the car. And he had some weird requests about trim replacement and stuff like that. But ultimately, I was able to do his deal by selling him a car for so much more than I would have sold it to him if he just wanted the car and didn't have this ridiculous trade requirement. And so I sell him a Rapide. He drives it a lot more than he expects to. And he also has this mental block of putting more than 2,000 miles on the car. And so he brings it right back, says, I'm ready for my next car. and he has the same rule. Now, obviously, I had just sold him a car for about $40,000 or $50,000 more than I really sold him the car on the paperwork that he signed. And so I'm not gonna pay more for it coming back. But as I recall, this would have been around 2012, and we had the Aston Martin Virage. And for a short time, Aston thought that they could have a car between the DB9 and the DBS, and the Virage was right there. It was like a 240 MSRP. They only made them in model year 2012, and they were sale-proof. I'll actually have another Virage story later in this compilation. But this car, I had extra money back, and ridiculously, even though no one should have ever paid MSRP for a Virage, he was very happy to, as long as he was shown the exact same money back for his Rapide. And so he bought this car and got stuck in it forever. I mean, the next week I started to get calls from every dealer in the United States with him trying to sell this car or trade it on something else. And none of them were going to give him what he had just paid, obviously, because that's not what he really just paid. And so he was having no luck. He ultimately, I think, ended up trading it on a Bentley, which could have had an equally massive rebate back. But I mean, ultimately, Ponzi schemes run out because there's no new money to feed them in the normal, scam sense of the word. In this case, he just ran out of cars that were more and more expensive with more and more margin to fake discount by giving him too much money for his trades. So during that time window, Lamborghinis were not necessarily like flying off the shelves, but when the Aventador came out, that changed just a little bit. And so we did have a really long waiting list for the cars because most of the good customers wanted one, and we weren't going to get all that many. We got 1 or 2 a month. I had a long line, but the problem that always comes up when you have a high demand car and new people coming in, as I did because I was a relatively new salesperson at the time, that want the cars, and you start bending the rules, right? You take people out of order. And every single time we did that, it bit us so hard. The first one was our demo for the Aventador, and you sell those cars, kind of. You can't usually transfer the title. They're going to drive around on temp tags for a while, but they usually get a car at MSRP or very close to it, and then they just have to wait until they can have their personalized license plate on it. And so this car we had sold, but we hadn't really given them the title or anything like that. And within a week or two, I start to get calls from other dealers saying that this customer is trying to trade his car in or sell it privately, which he's not even really allowed to do. And I told the guy, I said, look, I'm glad you love the car as you're telling me, but I keep hearing that you're trying to sell it. And his objection was so turned up to 11 that it was obvious that he was lying. He said, that is a lie from the pits of hell. And I said, look, I believe very much in spiritual warfare. I don't think the netherworld meddles too heavily in exotic car transactions, but all I need to have happen is just people not tell me that my car that I'm supposed to still own is for sale by you, so whatever it takes. We had actually squeezed a guy in to get our very first one, and the problem, again, in that case is that most of the people that are now getting the hottest car on earth don't actually have experience in owning cars that are immediately more valuable in the arbitrage to the rest of the market at large. And so the same thing happens. We start to get calls all the time. And as a brand, Lamborghini doesn't want to see the first cars out there on the market immediately. They want the dealers more so to control the immediate value of the cars. And so it was just an absolute mess. And it happened all over again with the Roadsters, because you've got these new customers that have bought a lot of cars that want something. And I had this guy who didn't necessarily deserve, based on the number of cars he bought, to buy an early Aventador Roadster. But, he bought a lot of cars from us. He was building a good relationship, and we kind of squeezed him in when we had an extra allocation at some point. At the end of the day, he comes to us with his car ready to be delivered and starts demanding insane over allowances on his trade. He was a financing challenge and it was a big deal. And I was like, look, man, we're just not able to discount these cars by giving you more than your trade's worth. Your trade is worth this. That's what it's got to be. And we kind of reached this impasse where he had agreed, all right, well, I guess I'm just not going to buy the car. And that was fine because I could have sold the car to 10 other people. But then he went behind my back, starts calling the owner of the dealership and the general manager and just crying about Ed won't negotiate with me and give me the deal that I want. And my general manager just bent over backwards and gave him what he wanted. The problem with that was, it wasn't that I didn't want him to have a good deal. I just knew that he had a really, really big mouth. And he would let everyone in my community, probably even larger than that via the internet, know that he had gotten more of a discount than he thought he was going to be able to because he's such a great negotiator. And that is exactly what happened, which entered this little idea into the world that new Aventadors could be had at discounted prices when that was most certainly not the case. And it caused this massive sell-off. Everybody got scared that they were going to lose so much money on their cars. And it just created absolute pandemonium in my little microcosm of the Aventador market. That's why it's generally better for people who have more experience to have the cars. Now, one of those was actually unintentional because I sold a very good friend of mine, Tom, a Huracan way too early. And it wasn't my fault or his privilege. It was very simply that the car got built by Lamborghini before the 5 cars that I had ordered before his. For whatever reason, his arrived. He never bought a new Lamborghini. He was well down the list, but it was fair based on his relationship with the dealership for him to have gotten that car, but he got the first one. And again, the same thing happened. He thought he was going to be able to flip this car for an immediate profit, and he could if he did it right, but he put it on eBay with the worst photographs the very next day. And I called him. I was like, dude, you cannot do this. Like, this is exactly what the manufacturer doesn't want to see happen with the first car that got delivered in the whole state. It was a mess, but we got it dealt with. I ended up bringing it through, wholesaling it out to a dealership that wanted some used Huracan inventory, and we made it all right. In the car business, they say there are 3 people who will always call you back. People who are trading down, have terrible credit, or negative equity. And this is a story about negative equity, the most negative equity that I have ever seen. Now, a lot of times people set up these really long-term loans on exotic cars, and just like a mortgage, you're not paying much principal down for many, many years. If you decide that you want to trade out of a car that's depreciated long beyond your remaining payoff, you're going to have a ton of negative equity, meaning that you owe a lot more than your car is actually worth. And I had a customer who, he's not really a bad customer, so this doesn't necessarily fit other than the fact that the deal was impossible. And it took me well over a year to make a deal work for this customer, even though he desperately wanted to buy a car. He just didn't have enough money out of pocket to overcome this massive hurdle of his negative equity. And generally, I think he owed $100,000 on a $50,000 car. So 100% more than the car's value in negative equity. And there just aren't that many cars that you can bury that kind of negative equity in that he would have considered owning. And so same thing again, a Virage popped up, which we had a massive rebate. And most banks will loan at least up to MSRP, maybe MSRP plus taxes or 10%. We finally had the right car with the right discount, with the right incentive to make a deal happen. But if you have a guy with negative equity and you're a car salesman, as long as you work hard enough, eventually you can find a way out, but it takes exactly the right car. Now today, the LP670, the Mercy SV, is one of the most high demand and hottest used exotic cars that you could possibly imagine. But when they were new, that was most certainly not the case. And there were massive rebates for a handful of them that were remaining in inventory. There was a Telesto car, a Blue Fontes car, a Monterey Blue car that just sat at the port in Baltimore for forever. And we had all the window stickers we could just call and have it delivered to the dealership whenever we had a customer. And I had a guy, a very young kid from Boston, who wanted to trade a 997 Turbo on the car, and he wanted this Grigio Telesto car. So we got the deal done, got everything set up, and ultimately secured the car, got it down here, and he was going to drive his 997 down from Boston. Now, we didn't have a ton of profit in the car because we were having to discount it so heavily. It was well known that you could get a big discount on one of these cars. And he told us that, you know, the 997 had kind of been his daily driver. It had a lot of miles at the time for like a 2 to 3 year old Porsche Turbo, but I think he said it had 70,000 miles and it needed a little bit of paint work for some curbs and things like that. And he shows up a few days later having road trip down from Boston in this car in the most destroyed but functional Porsche I've ever seen. I mean, it was the patina Porsche for CarTrek 6, paled in comparison to every single panel needed paint work. It was impossibly cheap, and we had numbered it pretty cheap, mostly due to the miles, but then it shows up and it was just like, what happened to this car? But you know, again, he was a young guy. He said he'd made his money in technology, which is usually code for his grandfather worked a lot harder than my granddad, and he just was able to do such things with money. But he bought this car and immediately road trips it home by way of several different destinations back to Boston. And I don't even know why I pulled it, but a year or so later I pulled the Carfax, I think just to see how many miles he'd put on it, and he'd already crashed it. In fact, he crashed it on the way home. There was like a parking lot level incident with a police report before he made it all the way back. He's traded it since then. Now somebody owns this as like the pristine SV of their collection, but it had a very, very hard first week of its life. There was another SV that I got for as a pre-owned car for a customer, and we financed it using a lease kind of Premier Financial style, and then he would build up equity by having it for a little while and the car slowly going up in value, and he would constantly refinance it. I think I refinanced the car for him 3 or 4 times where he would cash out $20,000, $30,000, in most cases actually having to pay new taxes and stuff like that or build it into the loan. But essentially anytime I could cash him out, he wanted to do a new loan on this car. And so it probably looks on Carfax like it's got 5 or 6 owners, but he's had it since the second owner, turned it in very quickly. A lot of times customers had wives that were very supportive of their automotive obsessions and their hobbies and their spending and all that, but that was not always the case. And I had a customer whose wife was like a staunch environmentalist. And so he was a wonderful customer, but she made it a big challenge, primarily because he didn't want her to know that he owned any of these cars. And so I sold him a Gallardo, another Gallardo, a Mercy, something else. I mean, just tons of cars that he loved and wanted to drive, but he couldn't. So he kept stashing them in these little public storage units around town, and he was sneaking out at night to go drive these cars, which made her think that he was cheating on her. And he told me the story that one night he was at home and maybe she had a couple extra glasses of wine that night, and she said, "Did you know that all of your car is made of plastic?" And he said, "Well, no, it's not. It's made of aluminum and steel and some carbon fiber." He was actually talking about his Tesla because that's what he daily drove. She was very happy about the Tesla, very environmentally friendly, I suppose, at least she thought so. And she said, "My private detective says you drive very, very recklessly." And he's like, "Wait a minute, what do you mean my car's plastic?" She said, "Well, he had a tracking device and he couldn't make it stick anywhere with its magnets." And he said, "Well, why are you tracking me?" And she said, "Well, you're sneaking out every night to go do something with some girl, and I am tired of it." And I don't know exactly how he explained it away, but I think he ended up convincing her that she was crazy. She probably was to some extent as well, but they're no longer married, but he does still have a lot of great cars and motorcycles. Now, there was a customer that was not a great guy, but he became a very good customer, probably out of the spite in my heart that I should feel badly about. But here's what happened. He wanted to get into the exotic car rental business, and he came to me because I knew about it, having come out of that business before being at the dealership, and asked me a lot of questions. And we actually found a business that was really struggling, and they were looking for some support. And so we both met with the owner of this business and offered him kind of a way forward, a new business model that would have worked really well and made him a lot of money. Well, this guy, after roping me into that discussion, went behind my back, cut me out of the deal, took equity in this business and a job with them, and there was nothing left for me. And that was okay because I had a great job at the dealership. I was very happy and I didn't really want to. I was going to treat it as a side job. He wanted it as his own job. So whatever, that's fine. Well, immediately then they needed to spin up a lot more cars, and we had already found kind of an investor that was going to come into the picture and help them buy a bunch of cars. And so I sold that guy about 10 cars over the course of the next month or two. It was a wonderful month in sales for me at the dealership, and amazingly, and perhaps most, grace of God, I was looking at buying this amazing trade. So my Scud that I had for a long time was Silverstone over red, and I love that spec on Ferraris. And at that point, I couldn't remotely afford one, but there was a really cheap 2005 F430 that was Titanium, silver over Bordeaux, and it was a spectacular car. Every single option, ceramic brakes, carbon racing seats, all the carbon interior, and it was wonderful. And I was so close to buying it, but I really couldn't stretch to do it. It was not the right time. And so I ended up saying, hey, here's a car that I genuinely love. I would love for you to take it out into the rental market, put a ton of miles on it, bring it back, and then I'll buy it cheap enough that I can actually afford it, because I like terrible examples of really cool cars even back then. And so he bought that car as nice as it could possibly be, and it broke constantly. I have never seen a 430 become so unreliable, but it cost him so much money over the course of the next few months, and eventually he just dumped it to get out of it. And so I dodged that bullet, but I guess I probably dodged the bullet of the business because they closed that pretty soon too. One thing that anyone who works at an exotic car dealership in the United States will tell you is that Chinese college students are wonderful clients, and that is generally because their families send them to the United States to get educated, and they have absolutely no idea how much a reasonable car for transportation purposes costs. And so I had a lovely young lady come in, and her father had just given her the amount of money he thought she should use to buy a car, and it was $200,000. And obviously he thought that was going to buy like a small Audi. It ended up being almost enough to buy a Gallardo. In fact, we had an LP 550-2, kind of the continuation of the Balboni, and that car, with some money back, I think it was able to be sold for about $180,000, which with taxes in Georgia was right where it needed to be. She bought that car, paid in cash, and had a whole lot of fun. She had some boyfriend with her that they were just driving around, having a blast, going to school, whatever. Well, about a year later, I got a call from the boyfriend, and he said, "Mr. Ed, we have a huge problem. The car was crashed." "Oh no, is everybody okay?" He said, "Yes, we're okay." But what happened was somebody flashed a light at them and they'd run off the road. Now it sounded, in the way that he described it, like somebody just took a picture of a Lamborghini and they crashed it. And the car was properly totaled. But he said that the insurance wouldn't pay. And I said, "Well, your insurance or the at-fault insurance, the person that ran you off the road?" He said, "Well, they didn't stop." I said, "Okay, well, you've got a couple of options. You could either look through security footage for all the surrounding businesses, see if they provide it, see if you can get a license plate, tell the cops, and maybe they can go find them." But I didn't think there was actually another car, or at least not one that really did anything wrong. And even if you do, they probably got minimum coverage for minimum budgets, $25,000 damage limit, and you're not going to get much out of it. And so really what you need to do is just call your insurance and have them pay for it. He said, "Well, we had just gone to China for Christmas for the month, and we had emailed our insurance saying to cancel it while we were gone and the car was parked, and we asked that they put it back into place the next month when they got back." Now, the response they'd gotten from the insurance company had been, "We can take it off because you're making that request for right now, but we can't make future changes to your policy based on today's email. Just let us know when you're back and we'll reinstate your coverage." Now, they didn't have a lien, so there wasn't any bank that was going to get mad. Obviously, they would have gotten a letter from the registration, but they didn't care. And so they got back. Obviously, they did not contact their insurance company. They went out the first night and crashed the car. Now, Dad didn't need to know that they had crashed this car oceans away, and so they said, "Ed, we have to get a car that is better than the Lamborghini for less than you can sell the Lamborghini for." And I'm like, "Well, the Lamborghini doesn't move. It is broken." And I ended up getting our body shop to buy it kind of as a clean title salvage for, I think, 60 grand. And I'm like, "Look, but I don't know how much more cash you have. Unless you have another 200 grand, we're not going to come up with a car that looks better than yours." And we had a barely used Aston Martin Vantage S Roadster that certainly doesn't look like a nicer car than a Lamborghini to anybody else, but it was a convertible and it was silver. I don't know. They were able to decide that it was. They scraped together their allowances and got about $20,000. And so I guess for about $80,000, they bought this Aston, and I don't think Dad ever got mad. They kept driving it, and they kept the insurance on that one. When I had the rental car company, I had a yellow Gallardo, and I'd rented it to this guy. And when I went to the dealership, I tried to, get as many of the rental customers to come over and buy cars. These are people already in my network. And so this guy came in, and we talked about his car. And I knew at the time that he'd rented the car that he had like an immaculate Lotus that he never drove, and he talked about how perfect it was. Very different ownership style than mine, but that's fine. That's the way you love cars. Well, he wanted an Aston Martin Vantage with a manual transmission, and we had an amazing one, like every single option, a high sticker. Probably, not the best investment car, but a really, really cool Aston Martin. We go back and forth. It's a complicated deal, and he's a tough guy to negotiate with, whatever. It takes us hours and hours and hours, and we don't deliver him the car until very late in the evening when it's already dark. And he's test driven the car, looked around the car, everything's great, and he drives it home. And he's a little nervous because he wants to PPF the car and protect it, and he never wants to have any blemishes, and he had like a 40-mile drive to get back to his house. The next morning, he shows up as we are opening, and the car is covered like in this temporary clear bra, almost like saran wrap. And he comes in, and you can tell this dude hadn't slept a wink. He is freaking out, and he has this extremely, it must have been 4 or 5 pages of imperfections that he had found shining bright lights on this car overnight. And I start looking through, and other than, maybe an error light that had come on because it was an Aston Martin, almost everything was totally normal for a hand-built British car. We're going through it. I'm looking at the car, and he's, whatever. And we're just like, okay, look, it's an Aston Martin. It's yours. He wants to unwind the deal, give it back, just total buyer's remorse. As we're talking, I'm like, look, man, I understand, you have this car, you drove it home, it's titled, it's in your name, the warranty is started. Like, I understand that it's not what you want. Let's look at something else. And at the time we had a similar MSRP because of how nice and highly spec'd this manual car was, that was an S, which gave like 10 more horsepower and a slightly better paddle shift transmission as opposed to the regular sports shift transmission. And so I said, let's go drive this car. Maybe you'll like it better, and then we'll look it over very, very carefully and see which one you like better. And this takes all day. I go to lunch with him and we're just kind of talking back and forth. He's just distraught over owning this imperfect car that was as perfect as I'd ever seen an Aston Martin be. But whatever, we go back and forth for the whole day. He spends the entire day at the dealership, and finally he agrees to the trade. Again, in the dark. And so he drives the thing away, and as you would imagine, the next morning he comes back with the new car and a new handwritten list of all of the flaws in this car. And so I'm looking at it, I'm like, yeah, it's like that. We could probably wet sand that out, whatever. It's just, look, hand-built, hand-painted cars are not perfect. It's not a Honda, and it's a lovely car. It was well built, but it's an Aston Martin, and they just have little things, whatever. And so he's just out of his mind. And so I don't know how we'd even done it. I think we collateral swapped the loan since it had just been open for like 24 hours, but whatever. And so of course my response is, well, look, let's go look at this car. And at that moment, my boss came over and he said, Ed, do not sell this guy any more cars. Let's just deal with the 2 cars that he has and we'll go on. Ultimately, the outcome was you own this car. You drove it home, you bought it, you signed the paperwork. We bent over backwards to give you more money than we should have on your trade to make this deal work, because it's now going to be a 2-titled car for whatever. And so enjoy it. We hope that you grow to love it. And whenever you bring it back, we promise it's going to be better than we expect it to be. And we'll give you the same money as any other perfect car and you'll love it. Well, that didn't happen, of course. I found out like 2 weeks later he traded it for a Maserati, which couldn't possibly have been any better, but I hope he had a wonderful time. In that same vein of buyer's remorse, immediately, I had a guy, older Italian gentleman, super nice guy, and he just loved Italian cars, always wanted one. He'd had some Mercedes and BMWs and things like that, but he came in and he wanted a Maserati. And we had a Grand Sport, so not a really reliable or useful car, always broken, but we had run it through the shop. It was a car on consignment that we probably shouldn't have even taken, but it was a really nice Grand Sport. He wants this car. We go dealing with it, and he test drives it, loves it, understands it, has been looking forward to Maserati ownership for a very long time, and he buys this car. And so we've test driven it, and I'd parked it kind of around to put the temp tag on, make sure his seats adjust the way he wants it to, and send him on his way. And I guess he had forgotten something at my desk or something like that, because ultimately he kind of pulled around the dealership after taking delivery, signing all the paperwork, it's his car, and parks it right in front of the building, and then walks in another door. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on? He says whatever it was, which I have totally forgotten about, because at that very moment, the car was crashing itself into a Jaguar in front of our dealership with no one driving it. Now, there was a very, very slight grade, and he had left the car running and put it into neutral and forgotten to engage the parking brake. And so the car rolled backwards on its own, and not going very fast, but enough to damage the paint of both cars, hit the Jaguar. And he goes bananas. His brand new Maserati was damaged. He's like, your car just hit your other car. Well, one of them already has your name on the paperwork, and you drove it there and you left it there, and it was really your fault that this happened. But I'll tell you what, you pay to fix yours. We'll pay the blot guy to repaint the front bumper of ours. Everything will be okay. And he was just, oh no, he's just pacing around, talking to everybody, trying to get somebody to say something different. But look, man, it's your car. You took delivery, you crashed it, and it's okay. We're not mad. Just go on about your day. And if you need a recommendation for a body shop, we have several. Well, he took it home, but a couple of days later, a more elderly Italian woman came in, and she had these rhinestone glasses and more makeup than I thought you could paint on a face, and she asked to speak to the general manager. And that was one of the days I was very pleased not to be the general manager. And she wandered right into his office, and she just yelling at him, letting him have it. Then it shifts to kind of trying to sweet talk him and maybe offer him some other forms of negotiation. But she was like, you need to take my son's Maserati back because it's your fault that he crashed it into one of your cars. And he was like, well, we're not going to do that, man, but I appreciate you coming in. And they spent well over an hour talking. And he came back and he's like, that was his mom. I said, I figured that part out. But it was still his Maserati, and I'm sure Mama was proud. But without a doubt, the worst customer encounter that I ever had and lived to tell the tale, which I never thought was going to happen in the moment, was a guy in a Gallardo Performante. So we had this car. It was kind of an aging piece of inventory. We'd acquired it for the wrong reasons, whatever. It was a 2012 Gallardo Performante, an LP570 Spider. So this guy comes in, and he had been in many, many times and spinning all these ridiculous tales about his tech fortune and his professional tennis player wife. We wouldn't tell us who it was, but she said he was going to buy this car one day, but not that day. But he just wanted to look around. And so I was busy one day after I talked to him several times, and so he starts talking to another one of the sales guys, and he refuses to let this guy test drive a brand new Lamborghini on a Saturday, which was generally the policy. Like, you don't need to be out test driving these cars. And it gets heated. And he's screaming profanity in our showroom on a Saturday into this salesman's face. And this salesman kept a lot of firearms on his person, in his desk, around him. So this customer was in real danger if this situation escalated, and it was on the verge of significant escalation. And so the management staff actually stepped in, and they were like, look, what's going on? He's like, I want to test drive that car right now. And they're like, well, I'll tell you what, we'll let Ed test drive it with you. And I'm like, guys, come on. And so, we have to move a bunch of cars out of the showroom to get this thing out. But they're like, maybe he'll buy it. I'm like, he's not going to buy it. We've talked to this guy for hours. It's just like time-wasting guy, has nothing better to do on a Saturday. Whatever, but I've been told to take this guy on a test drive, so we're going to do it. Now, our test drive route is sort of dictated by the insurance to be very easy to do. So no unaided left turns, traffic lights, things like that. And so it's designed to be very, very controlled. So we go out of the dealership and go get on the highway, go and exit south, switch seats, they drive back. So we're supposed to demonstrate how the car works, show them the features, and then let them drive. And that section of the highway, honestly, is very rarely patrolled by police. It's supposed to even be state troopers that do it there, but there are some local cops very occasionally. Regardless, I let him have the car and make sure he's comfortable, everything's adjusted, and this dude takes off like he is a wannabe getaway driver, Jason Statham transporter. It's unreal. And I'm like, dude, nope, we got to slow down. I appreciate that you want to experience the car, but that's just not how it's going to go. And he would. And then he would go crazy again. And I'm like, man, what are you doing? Like, sir, just slow down. It's okay. You can experience the car at a little over the speed limit, but he was trying to go 130, 40 miles an hour. And he'd slow down and then just go crazy again. And about a quarter mile up, there was a local cop driving in the same direction. And I'm like, look, there's a cop. This is great. It's going to calm the situation down. He downshifts, lunges up at the cop, and barely gets slowed down before he rear ends the police officer in a bright yellow Lamborghini convertible. And I'm like, look, man, we just cannot drive like that. I've got to tell you to slow down. If you continue to drive like this, I need you to pull over and I'll get us back to the store. And if you want to buy the car, that's okay. He then goes, watch this. No. And he downshifts again and goes around the cop so close that I thought they were going to hit mirrors. And of course, the top is down on this car. And I look at the cop and I'm like, what are you doing? Arrest this guy. And I'm like, and the cop, no reaction. I guess he assumed that we were just messing with him, because we knew the cops well in the area, but he won't chase him. I'm like, I'm going to die because we're coming up on a clover leaf. And he looks at me and he goes, I am invincible. And I go, well, I'm not, and we're about to flip this car over. And holy cow, thank goodness it's a wonderful all-wheel drive car and it was very, very stable and we made this turn. But we get back to the store and I'm like, I take the key out as soon as the car stopped and I'm like, sir, that is not how we drive it. And of course, I didn't really like it anyway. And he just storms off, gets in his car and leaves. And I walk in there and they're like, so did he buy it? I said, no, he did not buy it. And if you ever make me do that again, it'll be my last day here. Successful car purchasing is all about knowing your buying power and being able to move quickly. And the best way to do that is getting pre-qualified with Premier Financial Services. Call one of these numbers, speak to one of their representatives, fill out their application, and then you'll know exactly how much car you can buy. You'll approach a seller, tell them you're already qualified, you've got your simple lease set up from Premier Financial, and you'll be able to close very, very quickly. That's why Premier is one of the most powerful partners in the world of exotic car financing, and that's why I turn to them every time I go out and try to buy something crazy.
Apparently, you're allowed to drive a race without a rear bumper. With a caveat, you have to start the race with a rear bumper. Since my last car cheat racing video did so well, figured it's time to do a few more of my favorite car cheats. And we'll start with 1982 Daytona, NASCAR. And this was the famous, what they call Bumpergate. Now, Allison won the race with his Buick Regal. Yarborough complained endlessly that this was completely illegal. But what had happened was, in tech, their rear bumper was determined to be too low on the car. So right at the last minute, they re-welded it in the correct place on the car. And as they went out early in the race, apparently Yarborough, because they go nose to tail, tapped him, and Allison's bumper just flies off into the wall, which then causes the first caution of the race. And cars, like 3 cars, crashed out because of this. And they clear the bumper away. But Allison keeps running. You can run legally without a rear bumper, apparently. And then proceeds to start running away from everybody. And has to have fewer fuel stops. And isn't drafting anyone. And runs the entire Daytona 500, pulling away, eventually 23 seconds in the lead without drafting. Now, the cars could go maybe 100 miles between fuel stops, and he was well over 100 miles for the final stint, and he wasn't drafting anybody, which should be impossible. So apparently, what's believed is that they figured out that the car was more aerodynamic without the rear bumper. The bumper was causing drag, and that they made it fall off on purpose to win it. Now, the win stuck. That is still an official win for Allison. And I think it was his second win at Daytona of like 3 that he had in a row. But Yarborough insisted that this was a cheat. And all the evidence points towards it. Now, their crew chief, Gary Nelson, there's a video of him going, "Oh, I had no idea." And it's about the funniest thing if you watch. He's like, "Oh my gosh, that happened? Oops." He would go on to become the chief tech inspector for all of NASCAR later in his career, right? It's like letting the fox into the hen house kind of a thing. But of course, you want one of the great cheaters, which he was known to have been a great improviser of the rules, to be the tech inspector because he knows where to look for the cheats. But Bumpergate lasted for years, and people were like, and it's still uncertain, but quite certain that a bumperless NASCAR goes faster than one with a rear bumper. Apparently, you're allowed to drive a race without a rear bumper. With a caveat, you have to start the race with a rear bumper. My next favorite, now we switch to Formula One. And with one of my favorite teams, Tyrrell. In 1984, we're running the only non-turbocharged car. Now, a lot of cars in Formula One were moving towards turbocharging, but they were running the old Cosworth V8 with no turbo, mostly because they couldn't afford the turbo technology. And they had to find a way to interpret the rules that might help them keep up with the turbo cars. It's completely fair, right? And here's what they did. They had a water injection system that blew water over the trumpets of the intake to help with the breathing of the car, to cool the intake or whatever theory they had that they thought the car was going faster. But it had nothing to do with what it was actually designed for. A couple years earlier, Brabham and Williams had been busted for their water system. Their water system was for cooling the brakes. And they put water tanks in their cars. And the brakes, as they drove, they had a button that could fire water and cool the brakes. Completely legal. But they would finish the race hundreds of pounds lighter than anybody else because they had dumped all the water on the track. So Tyrrell took a page from that book and went even a step farther with it. They had a tank on the car for this water injection system, and which they were burning off a ton of water. Now, the thing is, they would just dump the water at the beginning, which allowed them to be much lighter than the turbo cars and made them slightly more competitive. Now, they weren't like crushing the season. They weren't a threat to anybody winning the championship, but they were trying to keep in the business. For a few races, they pulled this off, and what they were doing was they would come in, the car had to be at weight at the end. They had learned the lesson from the earlier cars that they weighed the cars afterwards. Is it at weight? Yes, the cars would come in at weight. Okay, everything's fine. How did they do it? Well, you're allowed to put water back in the car. You're allowed to refill those tanks. When they refilled the tanks at the end, they put 2 gallons of water in, which had 140 pounds of lead shot inside of it, under pressure. And they would fire it into this tank, and 140 pounds, poof, and then they would go off and finish the last few laps of the race, hopefully in the lead. And they did pull this off a couple of times. It was genius until that pressurized water has a vent, because eventually the pressure builds and you want to be able to get out, otherwise you blow the tank up. Out of the vent shot some of this lead shot, and the guys in the other pits were like, anyone to explain? Wait, were you next to Tyrrell? Yes, I was next to Tyrrell too, and we found some of this stuff. So eventually it came out, they were putting it in there. The inspectors come over and they're like, all right, what are you doing? Tyrrell beautifully was like, this is completely legal. I'm like, how is this legal? You have ballast, unsecured ballast. They're like, it's secured, it's in the tank. They're like, well, you're supposed to have a tool, special tool, to remove any kind of ballast. Yes, that special tool takes the tank out. And they kept coming up with it. Now, the FIA didn't want this car. Now, the conspiracy theory is it was the last of the non-turbo cars, and they wanted all the cars to be turbo, which they would be in a couple of years. That they penalized and attacked Tyrrell to make sure this car was done. And they eliminated, they took their points away for the rest of the season, which then ruined their next season because you don't get the travel money for 85. So it basically ruined Tyrrell. It was a punishment, I think, a little too far. Because their claim was, they're like, well, okay, the ballast is secured, but we found aromatics in the water. That means it was a second fuel source being sprayed over the carburetors. And the first time they tested it, they found 27% aromatics. The second time they tested it, they found 1%. And it's like, this is a little curious. But that was how they busted them. It's like, see, a secondary fuel source, you had illegal fuel lines and the ballast, and they hammered them. And poor Tyrrell paid the price. But what a beautiful cheat. Never would see it. Everything was fine. It's that invisible cheat that makes them great. Probably the most elegant, beautiful, engineered cheat of all time, and a lot of people know this one, was in 1995 World Rally Championship, the Toyota Celica GT4. Now, the GT4 was a really cool four-wheel drive Celica. It was a cool-looking car. Toyota insisted they use the Celica for rally, mostly for marketing purposes. It wasn't the ideal rally car, and even the Toyota team knew it wouldn't be at the front of the pack. So they had to come up with something brilliant, which they did. Now, these cars had turbos, and that was the look of the day. Right? Everybody had these cool turbos. The cars were pushing up closer and closer to Group B specs from back in the 80s. And if you haven't seen Group B, go look at Group B. Cars were bonkers. But they gave enough time. Usually, engineering starts covering the same ground, and they eventually start getting back to the crazy speeds of Group B. FIA's all, nope. We're going to put restrictors on your turbos. And what that does is it restricts the amount of air going into the turbo, and it keeps the power of these cars down around 300 horsepower, which is still a lot for these light little four-wheel drive cars. Toyota was like, yeah, maybe we need maybe a little more horsepower. Let's see what we can do. And here's what they did, and it's genius, because great cheats are invisible. In most racing series, they take these cars apart and inspect them a lot after races. The tech guys tear them apart. Tech guys tore this car apart multiple times. Never found anything. And officially, they never found this cheat. The word is a snitch kind of got it out and snitched on the team. But the FIA inspectors never found this. What they did was inside, so the turbo's got this restrictor on the front of it, and it restricts the air. And then you put a hose over it, your intake hose. Everybody's seen turbos, with the big, beautiful, colorful hoses going over the turbo and all that. Same thing as back in the day. Hose goes over it. You get a couple of hose clamps, or as the British say, Jubilee clamps, going around it that hold the hose onto the assembly. And those hoses, we sometimes have metal collars around them to kind of reinforce them. So none of this was anybody would draw any attention to. What they had done inside the restrictor, because you were allowed to build your own restrictor, the restrictor had 3 Belleville washers. And Belleville washers, they're used a lot on Porsches, are these kind of domed little washers. They're spring washers inside of it. And the function was that when you put the hose on with the clamps and you tighten the clamps down to tighten the hose down, as it squoze it down, the restrictor plate would move away 5 millimeters from the turbo, allowing air to flow around it. 25%, they figure, about 25% more airflow, which equaled about 50 horsepower. And 50 horsepower on a 300 horsepower car is a lot. It was so elegant because the trick was you loosen those Jubilee clamps and you slide the hose off, it pops right back into place. So the inspectors would be like, well, there it is. And they measure and everything's fine. They put the hook and it moves, it'll slide out. Completely invisible. Absolutely stunning. And so beautiful that the head tech inspector disassembled it on television to admonish Toyota, but really came across more of a fanboy thing, that he was kind of like, this is really cool. You got to see what these guys did. And it worked. It could have worked the whole season. And just like most cheaters, when they get caught, they got busted for that season. And they were actually not allowed to compete the next year in 1996 because of how obvious. And it's also the embarrassment level of the association. WRC was like, no, you guys are done. Just Toyota's done for a while. But that has to be mechanically one of the most elegant cheats of all time. Some racing cheats are serious engineering and brilliant thought. And some are just hillbilly funny. And my favorite, and of course it's attached to NASCAR, right, was Tim Flock, 1952. And back then, these were stock cars. These were just big sedans that they're running. And so they're not terribly fancy, but they did have to have roll bars in them. Roll bars weigh a lot of weight. That's who cares about the safety? That's a lot of weight there. So he famously built his roll cage out of wood and then painted it to look like steel. And no, I don't care. I mean, they got a seatbelt on. I'll be fine. I'll get thrown out of the car, whatever. Absolutely the most ridiculous. And it's not like this man had done a whole lot of serious things in his career, because probably what he's most famous for was Jocko Flocko. Jocko Flocko was his pet monkey, who holds the record for being the only animal to win a NASCAR race and the only NASCAR co-driver of all time. He'd have a monkey in a cage in his car racing in NASCAR. And it was kind of like the big gag that he'd have. But there's a monkey in there. And the story goes that at one point the monkey got out during a race and is like jumping all over him, because it's a monkey in a race car. You can imagine, the noise of a NASCAR, the smells, and going around, sliding around. This monkey is freaking out. I guess attacked him and scratched him. And then you're there trying to get the monkey back in its cage. That has to be, that's not cheating. Obviously, I think that's the reverse of cheating, is having a monkey in your car. But still, one of my favorite all-time NASCAR stories, Jocko Flocko. So continuing with NASCAR, and my second favorite funny story has to be NASCAR, is Ken Schrader was a NASCAR driver, and he was doing short track racing. And the story goes that he was driving and he was winning and doing really well, but he realized that his tires weren't going to last the rest of the race, and second place was closing in on him. So in a moment of genius, and I don't know if it's technically his cheating or not, he took his fire extinguisher, put it up by the front window, up by the firewall, and fired it off to make it look like his engine had blown. And he's just blasting the fire extinguisher out the window. Enough that the second place guy was started backing off, going, oh, okay, I got this in the bag. He's going to blow up and pull off to the side of the road. And he did it. He just mashed the throttle, firing his extinguisher, saving his tires, and actually ended up winning the race with his fire extinguisher in hand.
I'm super pumped to announce that in 2024, VINwiki is partnering with Bridgestone. So throughout the year, you're going to hear some great stories from their business, some awesome tire testing and things like that we're going to do. I've had a lot of Bridgestone and Firestone products over the years and loved them all. I know that you will too, but I want you to check out their Potenza line of tires for sports cars, supercars, and hypercars. Whatever your needs, whether it's ultimate track performance, road performance, or all-season performance, there is a Potenza tire for you. So check them out at the link in the description below and let us know what you think.
I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm basically in tears. There she is, man. I haven't seen her for years and years and years. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York in the 1980s. I was born in 1971. So in the 1980s, I was a middle school, high school kid, and I just saw this movie one day, Smokey and the Bandit, like everybody did at that age, and absolutely fell in love with the car. Fell in love with that black Trans Am. I was about 16 years old, I guess, maybe 17 years old, and I had to have one. And where I grew up in Williamsville, New York, just outside Buffalo, there's a lot of car people. Everybody had an IROC Z28 or a Mustang GT or a Trans Am or a Firebird or some kind of car. So I had the one in sights that I wanted. I wanted this Trans Am. I worked for 2 summers, constantly bagging groceries, caddying at the local golf club, and saved up as much money as I could. I couldn't get a new one, but I wanted a 77, 78, roughly something like that, Trans Am. I found one. I found one on Auto Trader back in the day when we would look through the Auto Trader in the magazine and in the, like kind of the newspaper. I found one in Rochester, New York. And at the time, my high school sweetheart, her brother and her father were big car guys. They built cars. They had a lift in their garage, and they would paint cars, and muscle cars were all around us. So I took him with me to Rochester. I had him look at the car, and he checked it out, and he said, "Man, it's great. You should get it." So I bought it. Here I'm driving back from Rochester in the middle of winter. This was a 1979 Trans Am. It was a 4-speed with a 400 cubic inch engine in it. I didn't know I was getting a Y84 special edition Trans Am, one of only 1,000 and some made. I just wanted a black Trans Am with the bird on the hood, and I definitely wanted a stick shift. So I drive it home, and here I am in high school now with this Trans Am, and it was my identity. It was, if you saw that Trans Am, you knew Joe was coming down the street. Everybody knew everybody. We would race these cars. We would drag race them. We would wash them. We would work on them with our fathers and our family members. Spark plugs, little things, catalytic converters, oil changes. So this car was my dream car. I loved it. I was in it every single day and took pictures and videos with it and just drove it all through high school. I'm a musician for a living. I play the trumpet. And when it was time to go to college, I did a couple years at college. I brought the car with me, and then I left college and went on the road for an entire year with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, playing my horn and traveling all over the world. It was a great experience. But when I came back, my father was transferred to Atlanta, Georgia. So now I had to make the decision whether to move to Atlanta or finish college outside of Buffalo. So I moved to Georgia, and I get to Atlanta, Georgia, Roswell, Georgia, and everything is further away. Driving down to Georgia State University was an hour plus. It was very expensive to go to school here as opposed to the school in Buffalo where I went to. So it was time to get a different car. And it broke my heart. I had to sell this Trans Am. I had to get I forget even what I got, like a Corolla or something with some good gas mileage. And I struggled with this decision for months and months. And finally, I said, all right, I'm gonna let it go. So I sell the car, 1993. I sell the Trans Am. I watch the guy drive away with it. I'm in tears. I can't believe I got rid of that car, but okay, here's the new phase of my life. So now I miss this car all the time, constantly. I still watch the movie. I still look at pictures of me with the car from years earlier, and I'm just kind of devastated. 1996 rolls around. I saved up a little money, and I went out and I bought a brand new 1996, I think it was 97 actually, red Trans Am with a 6-speed and an LT1 and T-tops and loaded, thinking that would kind of take care of the loss of the black 79 TA. And it was cool. It was a beautiful car. I drove that for many years and sold that when it was time. But it never really brought me back to that feeling I had with that other car. And throughout the years, I had like a Formula. I was a big Pontiac guy. A Formula 350. I had a couple other Firebirds. Nothing kind of made me happy like that Trans Am did. So I started to look for it. In the late 90s, the early 2000s, I had no VIN number. I had no recollection of the guy that I purchased it from. I didn't really dive in that deep. I don't even think I had a computer in those days, you know. So I just look in the basement for little information about the car. I would look online on my friend's computer to see if there was anything happening, like, you know, in the Trans Am world. But it was nothing I really delved into. This went on for years. I really wanted that car back, but I just didn't really know how to get it. So as time goes on, now I'm thinking, well, what if I buy black Trans Am? What if I just buy another one? Maybe that'll take care of this urge I have for this car and this driving experience. So I did. I don't know, 2013 or 14, I bought a black 1980 Trans Am that was rebuilt. It was originally a red Trans Am, but this guy turned it into a bandit car, did a wonderful job. I found it online and I bought it. It had a 400 in it. They delivered it to my house in Roswell, and I drove that car, and it was fantastic. It was a great experience, but I still didn't have that emotional connection to it. I'm sitting around one day with my son. He's about 8 or 9 or 10 years old at the time, and we're watching this show on Discovery. We just stumbled on it. It's called Trans Am, and it's these guys, Scott and Todd Warmack, that I think, and I hope I get this right, purchased the rights maybe to the Trans Am when Pontiac went under, or when Pontiac went out of business in the late 2000s, 2009 or something. So now they have these Trans Ams, and they have this shop where they take brand new Camaros and recondition them, refit them to be these 1,000 horsepower, ridiculous Trans Ams. They're just insane. They're beautiful. Couldn't afford one of those. And on the other side, they have Scott Warmack, who takes these older cars and either resto-mods them or makes them completely original, and they're just beautiful. So I'm watching this show, and they're working on a 77 or 78 Trans Am for a guy named Chuck Harkins. And they take this Trans Am and they make it into a supercar. But it still looks just like it did from the movie. But underneath was all this incredible new stuff that made it fast and safe and powerful. And I'm watching it with my son, and the episode ends, and I'm telling my son, I said, I had that car. I mean, a year or two later than that car, but I basically had that car. I've been searching for it. I've been looking for it. And my son says, Dad, you got to find it. I said, I'm trying. He goes, no, you got to find that car. We got to get that car back. And it hit me like, if you ever seen the movie Rocky II, and his wife, Adrian, is in a coma, and she wakes up and she says, win. And Stallone goes, win, yeah. And his trainer goes, what are we waiting for, right? And Rocky now is all into getting like in shape and winning this fight. It's kind of the same thing happened to me. My son wants me to find this car. And I said, man, I'm going to do it. I'm going to find this car. So my first thing to do was to call the Warmacks. And I got in touch with Scott, and I drove to, I think they're in Tallahassee. I drove to Tallahassee. I met with him. I saw his shop. I was absolutely in heaven. He made it very clear that without a VIN number, without any really vehicle history on the car, that I was probably not going to find that car. But he would help a little bit if he could, anything he could do. It was just a really cool experience. And he also said, I can also build you a car. If you'd like a car like the one we did on the show, we'll find you a Trans Am. And I said, yeah, I would like to do that, but I've kind of tried that on some level. And I'd really like to see if my car is still alive, if it still exists. So he connected me with Rick Dieters, who runs Trans Am Specialties of Florida, which is another top-end F-body Trans Am Firebird place, buy and sell, but also recondition and make these cars like perfect, right? So I call Rick. Rick spends an hour on the phone with me, asking me questions about the car. He just loves the whole idea of me trying to find this car. He also says, probably not going to find this thing. But he says, if you have a picture of the car, I'll put it on my website. We'll see what happens. And I had a lot of pictures of the car from the late 80s. I sent him a picture. He puts on his website. Mr. Granston is trying to find his 1979 Y84 404-speed Trans Am. He sold it in Roswell, Georgia. It was originally in New York. If anybody has any information or seen this car, let us know, reach out to us. And 3, 4, 5 months go by. And then I get a call from Rick. The guy that bought it from me stumbled on that post. And he said, yeah, I remember that car. I bought that car from Joe. I remember driving up his driveway. I remember his father was there. That was the car I bought. So Rick calls me, connects me with this guy, Robert Bates, just a class act human being. And Robert's so excited that he remembers this car. We're connected now. He looks for a couple weeks in his parents' basement, and he finds an old VIN number. We tracked the car to 2002 in Alabama. Now remember, this is 16 or 17. 2002, it goes dark. It hadn't been registered since then. So now here I am, 6 months, just searching. What do I do? I called the police department. I called the DMV. Nobody could really kind of help me out with this. And I kind of basically said, I have to either let this go or I have to really try one more time really hard. So I just kind of randomly Googled private investigators, Atlanta, Georgia. And this first name that came up, I just called the number. And the guy answered the phone, and he sounded like he was right out of the Smokey and the Bandit movie. Very Southern accent, very animated person. And I said, look, I don't know if you can help me, but I want to try to find a car I had as a kid. He said, what kind of car is it? I said, it was a 79 black Trans Am, kind of looked like the Smokey and the Bandit car. He said, hell yeah, I'll find that car. He said, man, I had one of them too. So I gave him the VIN, I gave him whatever information I had, and 4 or 5 months later he called and he said, got it. And he found it. He found it under a tree in the hills in Alabama. I go pick him up, I bring a bucket full of cash, and we drive up there. And it takes 4 or 5 hours. It was way up in the hills. We're coming from Atlanta, Georgia. The whole way I'm nervous. I'm almost in tears. Is it really going to be my car? He says, it's definitely your car. It's the same VIN number. We get there, and it's way in the back of the property. It's all fenced in. German shepherds running around. I'm not going to go in the fence. I'm knocking on the door. Nobody's coming to the door. And in the way in the back, I can see the front end, that special clip from the 79 Trans Am. And I'm like, oh my God, is that my car? And I walk around the fence. I'm going down the fence line, and I get to the car, and the first thing I see is this big buff mark on the right front fender that I put on the car in 1988. I just held the buffer there too long, almost winking at me. And I know it sounds a little ridiculous, but I'm basically in tears. There she is, man. I haven't seen her for years and years and years. It was very difficult. Nobody was home. The neighbor came over. The neighbor basically said, they're not around, but his sister lives up the hill. I'll give you her address. You can go up there. So I did. We drove up this hill to this little area where there was all these like kind of trailer park homes and close together, and lots of dogs and lots of, it was just, it wasn't a very comfortable experience for me, but I had to find out, if I was going to be able to buy this car back. So I go up to the door, I knock on the door, she answers. She's about my age, I guess, and I tell her who I am, and I'm looking for this car, and I found it down there, and I want to buy it back. And she says a couple things to me, and I recognized her accent. And I said, you're not from here. She says, no. I said, where are you from? She said, upstate New York. I said, I'm from Buffalo. And so she was from like just outside of Rochester. So right away we knew all the same, we loved the Bills, we loved the Buffalo Sabres, we had a lot of things in common. So she said, come on, I'll show you the car. So she took me down there, and we looked at it, and it had been sitting under a tree since 2002. I guess the guy that owned it now was the son of the gentleman that bought it from Robert. And I think he had passed away and left it to his son, and his son parked it in the back, and it just kind of sat there. It has T-tops, so the rain rotted out the floors. The car was a mess. I mean, it was there, but it was a mess. And I just basically said, look, I want the car. I don't care what it costs. You tell them to call me when they get home, and I want the car. Well, 8, 9 months later, I still don't have it. They don't want to sell it. They're not sure if they want to sell it. We couldn't come to an agreement. It was just heartbreaking for me, just let me have the car. Well, it's very emotional to us because it was my father's car, he's saying, and I'm saying, well, put it in the garage then, or put a cover on it, But anyway, they were cool. They didn't want to sell the car, and I was devastated. So I basically told my wife, I said, and my son, I have to try one more time, or I have to let it go, just like earlier. But this was for real, because it was consuming all of my energy, all of my emotional, just everything. It was just brutal. So I sent them a text and I said, look, I'd like to come back one more time. And if there's no rust, and if the car is in great, great, great condition, I'd like to give you, and I offered them a ton of money. I said, but if it's rusted out, or if it's going to need a lot of work, then obviously I can't do that. And they said, come tomorrow. And I went, and I brought a car guy with me, and of course he got under it, and it was ruined. There were no floors, barely. I mean, the car was shot. And so I nicely said, I can't give you that amount of money that I mentioned, because the car is it's ruined. And we negotiated, and we came to a price, and they took it. And I put it on the flatbed, and I drove it back to Atlanta, and we parked it in my backyard, and I looked at it for a few days and cried and told stories and took pictures and sent it to all my friends back in Buffalo, and nobody could believe it. Oh my God, you have the car back. What are you going to do with it now? So I called Rick Dieters from Trans Am Specialties of Florida, and I said, if I send you this car that you helped me find, you're very instrumental in helping me find this car, would you rebuild it? He says, of course, if it's rebuildable. So we put it on a flatbed, sent it to Trans Am Specialties in Florida. COVID hits, so it sits there for a year or so, and he's working on it, here and there, but he's got a lot on his plate like everybody in the country did, everybody in the world did, right? COVID finishes up as much as it can, and he's working on the car. He's sending me pictures. He's telling me, man, this thing is shot. This is going to take a long time. A lot of love and care is going to have to go into this thing. The engine was gone. The 400 Pontiac engine was gone. All the people in the Pontiac world and the car world said, look, since you're not a car guy, Joe, I don't know how to work on cars. They said, don't put another Pontiac engine in the car because it's not the original. It's not going to make the car have its original value. Put an LS2 or an LS3 or an LS1 in the car. It'll start up every time for you. So we did. We went with an LS2 out of a 06 GTO with a 6-speed manual transmission. And so he's building the car and he's sending me pictures. It's looking beautiful. Then he has a devastating fire in his shop and he loses 14 or 15 vintage Trans Ams. One of them, I think was either owned by Burt Reynolds or was used in the movie. Some connection with Burt Reynolds, just heartbreaking to lose the car. Mine somehow survived. They pushed it out along with a bunch of other Trans Ams during the fire, and it survived. And another year or so went by, and it was finished. So I got it back probably in 18. I got it back right about March of 18. Yeah, it was gone for 25 years. That car was gone for 25 years. And a lot of people, friends that are not in the car industry and friends that are, all said the same thing. There's a good chance that thing was wrecked. I mean, we drove those cars hard. Everybody drove those cars hard. Mine was mine was in Buffalo, New York. We drove it in the winter with a 4-speed, 400 cubic inch engine with posi traction rear end. We slid that thing all over the road. We used to slide them around on purpose. So I was sure if it was even around, it was in a junkyard somewhere. When I got the car back, it was this past July of 24, when it actually physically showed up at my house and it was finished. And my son now is 14. So it was a handful of years between, Dad, go find that car, and wow, there it is. And he was almost in tears. This thing came to our house in a beautiful trailered truck with car stickers all over it. It looked like I was getting a NASCAR delivered to my house. Everybody in the neighborhood came outside. We filmed some of it. The guy starts this thing up and backs it out, and it's one of those things that there's beautiful cars all over the world, but car people know. If you love a car, if you love a certain style when you look at it, I'm just as excited now as I was as a 16, 17-year-old kid. I have it now. I have it in my garage. It's the love of my life. I bought one of those bubble, things you put in your garage. The car goes in there. My wife thinks I'm out of my mind, but I have my Trans Am that I pined for years and years and years. I never thought this thing was going to survive. And now I have it back. It'll stay in my family forever. My son will get it. It drives fantastically well. It's fast, much faster than it was when I had it. Although it was torquey and powerful for the 79, but I'm absolutely in heaven. I can't believe I have this car back. I just feel fulfilled.
This month of VINwiki Car Stories is brought to you by Bridgestone. We've talked a lot this year about the Potenza range of tires for sports cars and supercars, but what I'm personally most excited about right now is the Dueler AT Ascent. It is their latest and greatest tire for on-road and off-road capability. I've tried so many tires for my off-road kinds, but this really seems like it's going to be perfect. It's got full-depth interlocking 3D sights and is their latest and greatest product, so it should give me all the off-road capability and wet and snow and everything else that I want to put it through, as well as much better road manners. So check them out as well as the whole range of Bridgestone products to find out what's perfect for your ride at the link in the description below, and look forward to more amazing content on VINwiki from Bridgestone. Years ago, I was a senior in high school, and after several years in development, Volkswagen had finally greenlit the production of the Bugatti Veyron. And this was around the time that the McLaren F1 values had finally started to creep back up from some low transaction values around $400,000. They were back up towards $1 million, and the idea that the world's fastest car was going to go up in value was a pretty novel idea after XJ220s and other cars that had been really, really fast had been really, really slow to sell. And so I knew that one day Bugattis were going to go up in value, and I wanted to be a part of that journey. So I actually contacted a German car dealer as an 18-year-old and said, I want an allocation for this exciting new car. And they gave me one in writing. I had a letter from them and from Volkswagen. I had phone calls with Bernd Pinschreiter, who was the CEO of Volkswagen at the time, talking about how to measure the seats and measure the pedals and take me to Molsheim for a fitting. And I got an allocation. Now, of course, I didn't have any money to buy this car, but my dream was that I'd either find a friend with some money that would let me drive it one day, or that I could flip it into making my first money in the car business. I actually found a guy who offered me $100,000 for the allocation, but like all unqualified car broker ideas, it never came to fruition. But the dream was born that one day I might have somehow a Bugatti Veyron of my own. Now, that wasn't realistic. I didn't know how I was going to make any money or do anything. But in the 20 years to follow, I've been buying cars, flipping cars, financing cars, selling cars, and I am finally in a position to make it happen. So over the past year or so, I've been an auto tempest every morning looking at what Bugattis were coming onto the market. And a few months ago, one really caught my eye. And so today, I'm going to show you the Bugatti Veyron that I can finally call mine. And this is the car, a 2012 Bugatti Veyron Grand Sport with one of the most amazing histories in its past. And this is the man who helped make it happen, Abe from Bugatti Broward.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
You were relentless. You were following this car. You gave me the whole history of the car.
That's it.
I mean, it was a really fun process with you.
Thank you. Now, the car itself is very, very special, but the history is what makes it truly amazing. This car's first appearance was at the Frankfurt Motor Show, still owned by Bugatti, displayed at their stand, and some people have called it the Red Dragon Edition. There was actually a Bugatti promotional photo shoot of this car that showed it off, and then it went to Southern California and was owned by Birdman of Cash Money Records. And then there's several news articles a couple of years later, after many, many photos and videos and things like that of Birdman using the car, that he gave it to Justin Bieber. And there's photos and TMZ stories and things like that. He drove it around with Soulja Boy for a little while, and then Floyd Mayweather bought it to preemptively celebrate beating Conor McGregor in their boxing match. He's well known to have had a ton of Bugattis, but this is one that he had. There's some amazing pictures and things like that of him driving it around to some of his strip clubs just before the fight, which he did go on to win. And then it kind of fell into the hands of R.D. Whittington of Wires Only. Now, he is the nephew of some of the Whittington brothers, who were legendary marijuana smugglers and part-time Porsche racers in the late 70s and early 80s. They went on to buy Road Atlanta because they could land their drug planes on the back straight. And so their nephew is now a very well-renowned car dealer in the Southwest, and he has transacted in this car a few times. Now, YouTuber Alejandro Solomon actually made a video driving this car when he was looking to replace his crashed Senna, and he did not buy it. And so it floated around, and it was eventually sold to a man by the name of Little Uzi Vert, which I guess means that I am now Big Eddie Vert. I know that he had it for a while. He, in fact, is the reason I don't currently have a speed key for the car, because he made a necklace out of it that says Vert on it. So maybe one day I'll be able to procure that back from him. But in the meantime, the car was sold again by Wires Only to a local guy in Miami, and he has now taken quite the haircut so that I could own the car. Now, very significant about this car is that it is the first and only Grand Sport to use the Super Sport wheel design and the clear taillights. I love that about it. Obviously, I've chased a few Super Sports, but this car to me is just so unique, so special, and so perfect. Now, when I say perfect, I mean not perfect. It's had a lot of paint work. It's had a little bit of strange history. The interior's a little bit worn out, but at the end of the day, it's exactly the way that I love to own a car. Now, Abe's been helping me in negotiating the consignor owner of this car, and we are missing a few things on this car that are not insignificant when it comes to value. For instance, normally when you have the large roof off the car, since the Grand Sport has the removable roof, there's 58 worldwide, 14 US cars, you would have kind of a pop-up tent toupee thing that you would put into the receiving holes for the top so that you could drive it, not very fast, but we don't have that. We don't have the factory covers, the factory trickle charger, all these sorts of things, the PDA that you're supposed to use to change the value. All these things are for another Bugatti that Abe has. And if we were to replace all of this lovely hardware that we don't have, as well as a second key, speed key,
PDA.
how much would that cost?
Don't even know. I'd have to
Lovely owner's manual. Yeah, don't have one of those. We'll be guessing, or you're going to teach me. But hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of things that I do not have and I will not drop. But that's okay, because none of that will interfere with my ability to use, drive, and enjoy this car. And that is what I am so excited to do. Now, in this journey, we have sort of recreated one of the videos that made me fall in love most with the Bugatti Veyron, and that was Jeremy Clarkson racing a truffle from Turin all the way back to London against James May and Richard Hammond in a Top Gear race. Now, he did that in a 2006 European car that I did chase a bit. It was sold at one point to a plastic surgeon in Moscow. Now it is back home in Molsheim, and they don't seem to want to part with it. But I loved that video. So yesterday, we were supposed to pick this car up, but a normal 2-hour flight from Atlanta to Miami turned into a 90-minute delay. A delay in taxiing, flew down to Miami, circled the Keys, found out the storm was too bad to land, went back to Tampa, sat there for 2 hours, came back here, sat on the tarmac, and about 12 hours later, we were finally here in Miami. Now, hopefully that will not be my experience. In just a few days, I'm going to shoot some content around Miami with Curated, and then I am road tripping my brand new, to me, Bugatti Veyron Grand Sport back home to Atlanta. Oh my goodness. Now, the Bugatti Veyron came out initially as a coupe version, but when they did the roof off in the Grand Sport, it still has 1,001 horsepower from the quadruple turbocharged 8-liter W16, unique to this car, but then continued into the Chiron. There's about 1,000 W16 cars ever made by the brand. And even though they thought they were going to build 150 of these, they didn't sell very well initially. The car goes 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds and onto a top speed of electronically limited 229 with the roof off and 253 with the roof on, making it the fastest open-top car ever made when it came out. It uses a double-clutch transmission with 7 speeds. And one thing that you'll hear people talk about with Veyrons versus Chirons is the noise. And the noise doesn't get any better than this car with the roof off. You'll hear the turbocharged spool, you'll hear the blow-off valves. Listen to that noise. The other thing you'll hear people say about Bugattis is that they're so well built and civilized that it's a truly usable car. And as much as we all talk about wanting race cars for the road, there's a lot to be said about a car that you can actually take somewhere. A lot of the cars that we'd love to own and drive, you realistically wouldn't want to drive from Miami to Atlanta or across the country or even to dinner. You just want to run it around the block, say that you did it, go change your shirt, and go back home. But this car's got good air conditioning, it's got good visibility, it's got comfortable seats, it's got a little bit of room up front. Honestly, it's a car that you can take somewhere, and you can take it somewhere really fast. That is insane. But when you're just tooling around at lower RPMs, it drives like a Bentley. It drives like a V10 Lamborghini. It's not that big. It's not that intimidating. The capability is accessible. It's a car you can hop in, you can go, and you can go as fast as you want without worrying an awful lot about anything other than the maintenance. Now, fortunately, even though this was really a private party deal where a consignor was offering the car through Abe at Bugatti Broward, I was able to buy it through a qualified dealer, which meant I was able to build in some servicing and some repairs and some things. And so they've just serviced the car. They addressed a bit of a misfire issue because the check engine light was flashing when I test drove the car a little bit ago. And they went through everything to make sure that I'm at least pretty likely to make it all the way home. But I've driven a lot of Bugattis, I've driven a lot of amazing cars, but I've never driven a car like this with my name on the title. And I gotta say, that feels super duper different. I've got to thank all of you for watching our videos. I've got to thank our sponsors for supporting VINwiki. It's been an amazing journey with content, with cars, sometimes with profits, sometimes with losses. my goodness. But a whole lot of smiles and a whole lot more to come. Good morning from Curated in downtown Miami. Now, coming here was always part of the plan later in the week, not necessarily yesterday, but yesterday, just like the day before, did not exactly go to plan. The morning was perfect. I got to pick up my dream car. It was everything that I thought it was going to be, honestly, everything I ever dreamt it could be. No, it isn't perfect, but it is perfect for me, and I am loving the car. So the plan was to drive a little bit north, see some family north of Miami, get on some roads I was more familiar with, and play with the car. And we got to do just that as the Hot Rod Mura pulls back into Curated behind me. But shortly after departure, the first time I really got on the car, the check engine light started to flash with a misfire, exactly like I'd seen it do a few months prior on my test drive of the car in March when I first made my attempt at shrewd negotiation. So the car, I called the guys at Broward and I said, hey, this has come back. And they said, all right, we'll circle back, let's see what it is. And so I saw some family, relaxed with the car a little bit, just got to kind of reflect on the moment, and it has been everything I dreamt it would be, other than that small issue. So I circled back to Bugatti Broward, where they discovered it was not a cylinder misfire that had caused it to go into this limp mode. It was an exhaust gas temperature sensor that found a measure out of range. And so they cleared that, told me everything was good to go, committed to fix it in the event that it pops back up, and sent me on my way, where I immediately met our next problem, which is what happened when I got back to the hotel. The valet kicked us out, saying that it wouldn't make it up their ramp and that they were not comfortable with the liability of the car's value. So I was scrambling a little bit, but the guys here at Curated were gracious enough to let us come and park it here last night. And so we brought it here after taking some great pictures with Larry from Winning Automotive Photography. It spent the night here, and I think it's gonna have to spend most of the week here before I take it on a road trip back home to Atlanta this weekend. And so driving it around South Beach, just seeing all the beautiful places, it's everything I wanted. It drives a lot like a Bentley at low speeds. It gets really lively, really excited at high speeds, and I am so happy to finally be a Bugatti owner. Let's get this thing home. Now, this journey would never have been possible without our viewers and, of course, our sponsors. And today I want to make a special point to thank two of our sponsors, Auto Tempest and Premier Financial Services. Autotempest.com, all the cars, one search. It's honestly true because it's where I find my cars, and it's exactly where I found this car the second that it showed up. Because when a dealer stocks in a car, it can take days for it to show up on AutoTrader or Cars.com or Car Gurus, but I saw it the moment they stocked it in. I got in touch with the team at Bugatti Broward to make a deal, and I thought, with the right negotiation, this might work out. So if you're looking for your dream car, starting at Auto Tempest is the place to go because you're going to get all the results in one place. Also, Premier Financial Services. Without them, none of this would be possible. They've been supporters of the channel since the very beginning, and their simple lease is truly one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. They allow you to have all the benefits of a leasing structure while also enjoying the benefits of a traditional finance. You can accumulate equity, pay it off at any time, and you'll always know where you stand thanks to their amortization table. That's how I'll know as well. So you never know how it's going to work out, but I never saw this coming, and it wouldn't have been possible without our sponsors and without you guys. Thank you for coming along on my Bugatti journey.
The first of any car is always a special thing. It becomes more special when it's from an amazing brand. I got to work with, when I first started working at Canapa, they were already 1 year into the restoration of the first production Duesenberg. Now, Duesenberg, for the younger guys out there, was the car to have pre-World War II, and they were ferociously expensive. The Model Js were what every movie star drove, and it was the car to have. And they were twice as expensive as a Cadillac or a Packard back then. It was creme de la creme to drive a Duesenberg. And if you take a Duesenberg for years to a concourse, you almost always won. They're just the standard. If you've ever heard the phrase, that's a doozy, that's where it comes from, the Duesenberg. So we were working on the first production Duesenberg, which has a great story. The Duesenbergs built engines and race cars pre-war, pre-World War I, we're talking pre-war. And during World War I, they built aircraft engines, marine engines. They were geniuses. They were fantastic engineers. They had never built their own road cars. They built engines for other companies for cars, but they never built their own production car. So an equivalency of this would kind of be like McLaren. For years, built amazing race cars and never built a street car. And then all of a sudden, they build the F1. And you're like, wow, they built a car and it's worth millions and it's extraordinary and everybody has to have it. The Duesenbergs, after the war, their demand for their military stuff fell off and they realized that they had maybe to start producing their own car to stay solvent. And they had a few very wealthy people who were kind of pushing them towards that. And this was 1919. And one of those gentlemen was Samuel Castle. Now, who he was the son of the guy who found Castle Cook Foods in Hawaii in 1851. And he is 7 feet tall. He's a 7-foot tall missionary from Hawaii. And they own, I think, 95% of Lanai, the island of Lanai, which is the 6th largest island in the Hawaiian chain. They own most of Oahu through certain means of missionary and political stuff, which I won't get into, but Hawaii's history is a bit shady in that way. But an enormously wealthy man, politician, and big in sugarcane and things like that. His company eventually would become Dole Foods, which a lot of people know. So he's like, I want a Duesenberg road car. You guys need to build a road car. And it took wealthy people like him to convince him of that. And they're like, okay, all right, we'll build a road car. Now, they build race cars. That's what they do. So a road car was a little foreign to them. So they built the road car kind of like their race cars. So their first car was called the Straight 8. In retrospect, a lot of people call it the Model A, but they were never called the Model A in the day. They only called the Model A once the Model J came out. But they were called the Straight 8. They had a fabulous Straight 8 logo with wings on it. It was really cool. And it was the first road car with a Straight 8, and an overhead cam Straight 8. It was the most powerful engine ever put in a street car. And again, it was like McLaren putting a race car engine in a street version. So this had 88 horsepower. And this is back in the day when cars had like 40 or 50. So double the power of a normal car. That could approach 100 miles an hour. And in manufacture back then, usually built, especially the high-end guys, would build the chassis, the engine, and everything, and then they would send it to a body maker, a coach maker, to build the body. So they built this amazing chassis, basically big race car, Straight 8, and the other thing, the first time ever in history, 4-wheel hydraulic brakes, which was race car technology back then. So the first time that had ever been put on a car. They sent this over to a company called Bender to build the chassis, the body on it. Because a lot of these bodybuilders were descendants of people who built carriages back in the 1800s, and they would build you whatever you want. They could build you sleek bodies, coupes, limousines. They would turn these chassis into whatever you wanted. And he wanted a coupe. But again, 7 feet tall. And we have a picture of him. And you're like, yeah, the man was huge. So the proportions of the car are, kindly to say, ungainly. It is not the most attractive car in the world, especially since the later Duesenbergs were so beautiful. It kind of like something that a missionary would drive. It was black, it was very staid looking and kind of square. I got to sit in it, and they had to make a pad, which the pad was in there from when we found it, that you pushed a normal person towards the like a kid would have to have like something behind them to steer. A normal person needed the pad to get close to the steering wheel and the pedals. That's how big this guy was. They built this kind of strange body for it and sent it to him on a 3-masted schooner, is the story, that it was sent over to Hawaii, and it wasn't finished until 1921. And that's when Model A production began. They sent it over, and he must have been the king of Hawaii at that point. Like, to have a car over there would be one thing, but to have a Duesenberg race car. Another thing that the car had, which we found when we were restoring it, was really cool, is an exhaust cutoff. So there was a lever inside where you could just send the exhaust right out the engine instead of out the back. Nice little race car thing. And that's how you could get close to 100 miles an hour with it, was with the cutout. So you can imagine him blazing down these dirt roads in Hawaii with a Straight 8, cut out going and just ripping through. Must have been a blast. So he had the car for quite some time. The Model J came out, and it was our understanding that when it came out, that he sent his car back to Duesenberg, across the ocean, back to Indianapolis, to have it updated with more J parts, like to kind of make it cooler. And they did. They changed the fenders a little bit. There's a different steering wheel and a couple little bits, nothing drastic. And then sent it back to him again on a ship. It remained in Hawaii for quite some time. He passed away. Samuel Castle passed away in 1959, I believe. And it went to his nephew, James Castle. And he decided to bring it over in the 60s to San Francisco. This family stories go that eventually, as the car got older, it was just used as like a pickup truck. Like they would just throw stuff in it, they'd bounce around Hawaii, and the kids would get to drive it. And there were stories of like the cows trying to eat the interior through the window. So it had little value at that point as far as, it being what it was, the first Duesenberg. They bring it over. There was an article in a San Francisco newspaper about the first Duesenberg being brought over on a ship, and a picture of it coming off the ship that I found when I was researching it as the historian. Then it went and did a show in 1968, and then went into storage and sat kind of in storage for years. It eventually went to James Castle's son, Jimmy Castle, Jimmy Jr., who is the person who eventually brought it to Canapa. And interestingly enough, Bruce is famous for obviously Porsches and, Shelby Cobras and, certain types of really cars, but he's not known for pre-war restorations. Jimmy's like, well, you've done my other cars. You need to do the Duesenberg. And Bruce goes, no, that's not what I do. Bruce knows his limits. He was like, I'd love to, but no. And I guess he bugged Bruce for like 3 or 4 years until Bruce finally went, okay, you're a great friend, a great customer. Let's see what it is. They bring it over and they start disassembling it, and they hire a few specialists to work on it. The guy who led the charge was Dave Stoltz, and he is a master fabricator. And funny enough, is the guy who's going to be working on the Rocky Aoki Porsche with me. So he's there working on the first Duesenberg. He takes it apart, and this car had been sitting in Hawaii for decades. And Hawaii, of course, is a tropical region. Tropical weather does not like cars. You have salt water in the air, you have, the humidity and dampness, and the car's made out of a lot of different things. Back then, the chassis was steel, the skin over the body was aluminum. The body itself, the framing of the body, was made out of wood, and beautiful ash wood body underneath. The interior was wool, so there was mildew and mold, and where aluminum meets steel, you have reactions, and it was just a mess as it came apart. But the goal was, Bruce hired specialists for each different element, and he insisted that every part of the car that could be saved had to be saved. So if there was a rotted part in the fender, you don't roll a whole new fender. You cut that little section out, and you make that little section and weld it in. So that kind of meticulous work took years. It wasn't until 2013 that it was done. There are photographs of the body of the wood interior being done, and they would cut out just the rotted parts and make another piece of wood and then glue it in so it fit perfectly and the grain matched up. Like, that's the meticulousness that went into it, so that there was as much of the original car as possible. All the J stuff that had been added to it were removed, so that it would go back to the way it came out of the factory. And one of the reasons for this is there weren't many pictures of this car. We found four photographs of this. The entire restoration had to happen from 4 pictures. Luckily, they're all from slightly different angles and can kind of see the interior, so we could see what the material was inside. But we blew them up. I got on Photoshop, we enhanced them, we did as much as we could with it to find out every specific detail. So I had to redo the wheels, had to redo the bottoms of the fenders, and I still have a couple pieces of the thrown away steel at my house. Like, I've got a piece of the first Duesenberg. Over the years, they slowly reassembled the whole thing, and the goal was to get it to Pebble Beach in 2013. During that build time, of course, when you do restorations, there's lots of slow work, but as you get close to the days that it's going to happen, everything kind of snowballs. And right at the end, it's got to get together, and you have to get the engine on the chassis and the body over the frame, and they start putting it together. And I remember Bruce taking out for its first test drive down the streets of Scotts Valley, California, in what could possibly be, at that time, one of the most expensive cars in the world, because the story is told that Jay Leno, who was very into Duesenbergs, walked up to Jimmy with literally a blank check and said, "You put whatever number you want on this, and I want to buy the first Duesenberg." And Jimmy insisted that it had to stay in the family. So that was it. No check. No, thank you very much. But numbers are being thrown around like $50 million in 2013 about what this would be worth. And some people said even more. But it would never be sold, so we'll never know. So he's driving this $50 million car for its first time down the roads in traffic and comes back and he's like, "It's not running really, it's not running right." And now we're getting within weeks of Pebble Beach and everybody's getting a little nervous. The interior's done, but it's not running right. They find, and this is within a week of having to go to Pebble, a crack in the straight 8 block. It's run for the first time in decades. And, talking about really old materials. They find a crack in it. What do you do? It's like, you're not going to go machine a new Duesenberg block. You're not going to go find a straight 8 loaner somewhere and put it in there. And it's also, the body has to be taken off to get the engine out because it's so massive. So they have to fix it in the car. And this was one of the coolest things I saw there. There's a company that makes these little screw inserts. You drill a hole and you screw in the insert into the end of a crack. Then you drill halfway through that first insert and you screw in another one and you stitch these things together. And it's actually stronger than the block itself. And they do these things in massive scale when cruise ships fail, like in port, thousands of miles from a dock. They will go out and they put these massive things to fix the blocks of cruise ship engines. So this is a smaller version. We called the owner of the company, and he came out himself. He heard the first Duesenberg was doing it. So he flew out with him and his wife, came out, worked overnight, stitching this thing together, bit by bit. And one mistake, right? And you're done. Next morning, fixed. Next morning, turn it on. Perfect. A little bit of buffing, a little cleaning, didn't even know. And it was way far back on the end of the engine towards the firewall. It was a difficult place to get to. They did it. Amazing save, right before it has to go to Pebble Beach. Needless to say, we made it to Pebble Beach, which it was a huge hit there. Now, for people who have never been to a very high-end concourse, the concourse is more about the people and the politics than it really is about the cars. We had brought the first Duesenberg restored perfectly. We had advice from the Duesenberg Museum, from Duesenberg experts. Everything on it was exactly the way they took it apart, put back together again. It was meticulously gone through. In the Duesenberg class, it took second place. And people were hacked off, as you'd imagine. Jimmy, totally cool. He's like, whatever. He's like, I want to drive my grandkids to McDonald's in this. He's like, this was just for fun. But for the team, it was hurt. And Jay Leno actually was there when the judges came through, and they picked out some nitpicky thing about the car. And Jay Leno, who by the way, has a flip phone, which I thought was funny, opens his phone, calls his Duesenberg guy, and he's all like, no, talk to him. This is correct. This is correct. Jay Leno was trying to defend the car there on the field. And they're like, nope. You've got 10 minutes to fix this wiring thing, that the wires were wired incorrectly to the taillights or something was weird like that. And Charlie Burton, who is one of the head builders there, he's under there fixing it and gets it right. They bring the judges back and look, we fixed it. No. They gave it like, the classic car award or some kind of, secondary award, really. We had people come over to us afterwards, and they're like, who were pretty famous people I can't mention, but they're like, that car should have won its class. That car should have won Best of Show, hands down. There were politics going on. And it's unfortunate when it comes to that. But this was amazing. It would go on to win another concours that we sent it to, and it went on to get some acclaim. But Jimmy wasn't really interested in showing it. Jimmy wanted to drive it. And he did. In fact, he drove it at the Pebble Beach. They have a drive before the concours that if you drive your car in that drive around Pebble Beach with these amazing cars, that if two cars tie, the car that did the drive wins. That's the tiebreaker. And Jimmy's like, heck yeah, I'm going to drive it. And it drove great. He had a great time in it. And that was his idea. I'm going to drive it. He goes, yeah, I spent all this money on it. It's going to stay in the family. We're going to drive it. We're going to have fun with it. And that's what he did for years. But eventually he's like, his family wasn't interested in it. They're not, I guess, car people like he is. And Jimmy's a big car nut. So he's like, well, what do I do with it? I don't want to sell it. I want it to leave the family. And I don't want it to move into another hands. So his decision was to donate it perpetually to a museum, the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum in Indiana, which seems to be like the appropriate place. I think first choice was like the Smithsonian because of its history. But the Duesenberg Museum, obviously fantastic. And the idea was that it's a perpetual donation, which means that the museum can never sell it to an individual. It has to go from them, if they lose it, to another museum. That it will be forever in the hands of the public, that people will always be able to see the first Duesenberg and enjoy it and enjoy its story, just the way I do. So if you get a chance, go out to Indiana, go to the museum, and check out the most awesome first Duesenberg.
So those have been our top 10 car stories of the year for 2024. Thank you so much for watching throughout the year, and especially tonight. I wish you the very best in the new year. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year.